What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto gets the Rinnegan when he is a kid? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Jiraiya stood passively, watching the elderly toad before him fix him and his apprentice with one of the most intense gazes he had seen on the old geezer. "Why have you summoned me and my student here?" Jiraiya asked. "Does it have anything to do with the prophecy we talked about before? Because if so I think he might be th. No, Jiraiya," the old toad said with an edge in his voice. "I had a dream last night. A terrible dream which must be averted at all costs." Fukakusu and Shima looked alarmed at the tone in their leader's words. "Did it have something to do with Jiraiya boy?" Fukakusu asked with a bit of worry in his voice. "Yes, normally I would not receive dreams this vivid, nor would I meddle if the consequences were not as dire. But this was not ordinary. This was the end of the world." Jiraiya's eyes narrowed, as did the boy's eyes at his side. "Surely the toad's Su, not just the shinobi world Jiraiya," the sage said with authority. "Every summon's world, the samurai, the innocent. Everyone dead and gone." Jiraiya's eyes widened to the size of plates. Surely something like that wasn't possible? Not within this lifetime. However, there is one individual who can prevent this scenario. Your apprentice, in fact. Jiraiya looked in shock down at the boy next to him, not quite believing his ears. The boy who he had taken under his mantle on a whim. Nagato looked back at Jiraiya, confused with all that was being said. "Jiraiya-sensei, what does he mean? What am I preventing? Is it because of my eyes?" Jiraiya looked back at the sage, his face conveying his disbelief. "You mean Naga?" "No, Jiraiya, not the young Rinnegan wielder. Not even your next apprentice, who will be as, if not more dangerous. It will be your third apprentice that will decide the fate of the world. His name will be Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the offspring of your second apprentice and a young kunoichi from Whirlpool." Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, not quite understanding. Wait. So then why was I told to bring Nagato here? His friends are quite worried as to why I had to bring him and not them. Also, are these apprentices of mine even born yet? It sounds like the last one isn't due to show up until after my next one, which I wasn't even aware I was getting. Arg. This isn't what I had planned. He sighed, as Nagato gave his sensei a pat on the shoulder. "It's alright sensei, I'm sure there's a reason for all of this." "There is," the old toad said, chuckling. "Young Nagato, you will help to teach Naruto as soon as he is able. Once you unlock all 6 paths of your Rinnegan." Nagato's eyes widened at the toad's knowledge, as he had yet to tell anyone, even his sensei and friends of his recently acquired knowledge of his eye's powers. "You must be in Konoha to assist the boy in his training. You will be able to seek your own destiny after he understands what he must do, and how he must train. Jiraiya, you will also teach the boy all you know, and all his father knew. All 3 of your apprentices will grow to be extraordinary shinobi, all capable of changing the shinobi world drastically. However, only the last will be able to deter the end of everything." Jiraiya nodded, determined to find out as much as he could. "I understand. Could you please let me know of who my second student will be so I may seek him out?" "No," the sage yelled suddenly, before wheezing slightly from exertion. Shima leapt up and patted the old toad's shoulder. "Don't push yourself. You're pretty old you know," she exclaimed, worry evident in her voice. "Jiraiya, you must not defer from your current path." The toad wheezed, trying to catch his breath. "I shouldn't have even told you as much as I have, and yet it was necessary, for if you missed any one of your students the world would fall. I am telling you who the next 2 people are purely so that when they come across your path, you know not to dismiss them so readily. Do not mistake my dream as a mission, it is merely to help guide you." Alright, I understand. No seeking my students out, just go with the flow until they show up, and everything works out in our favor, right?" He received a nod in response, and smiled. "Alright then, it's time me and Nagato leave. One more thing, and this is for young Nagato." Nagato turned around to look at the elderly toad, wondering what he could want from him. "If all goes as should, young Naruto should unlock the same power that you possess." Nagato's eyes widened, his mouth gaping at the information. While Jiraiya's reaction was much more subdued, his mind was racing just as much. 2 Rinnegan users? And both of them my students? Kami, what did I do to deserve this? I don't know if this is a curse or a blessing. I wonder what Tsunade would think if I told her this. He chuckled to himself, imagining her disbelieving face before she launched him into next week for no good reason. He glanced over at Nagato, smiling at the growing joy on his student's face. I'm not alone. Someone else will know what I'm going through. Someone else will understand my power. Nagato thought, smiling from ear to ear. I can't wait to meet him. 15 years later, Jiraiya stood on top of the Hokage monument, an orange-haired man with strange black piercings all over his body at his side. He took a deep breath before sighing, looking over at the cloaked man. I don't like this, Nagato. Your plan is far too militaristic to achieve true, lasting peace. And what would you suggest, Sensei? That people will understand each other? That the fighting will cease on its own? No, this is a false ideal, and one that will fail. Only by experiencing pain can people understand each other, and only then can the fighting cease. And what about what the old geezer said? We can rely on Naruto, you don't have to use this, Akatsuki. It will do more harm than good. This is simply a contingency plan, Sensei. Nagato said. Nothing is set in stone, and nothing ever goes 100% according to plan. Besides, if the boy's father was anything to go by, he should be able to defeat me and my associates hands down if need be. Jiraiya sighed again, before looking out over the village. So much had happened since that meeting with the sage so long ago. He had found Minato, and trained him to the best of his ability. So much was he impressed by his skill that he thought the old toad had mistaken the identities of the savior, since Minato seemed invincible. He fought in the Third Great Ninja War, and witnessed the destruction that the Hiraishin and Rasengan could cause, as well as the grudges that were formed from that combination. He saw the love of his life lose her two most precious people and leave, and his best friend fall into darkness. He watched as his student ascended to Hokage, before his life was taken, along with Kushina's. He witnessed the birth of the supposed savior of the world, and had seen him grow into a boy, somewhat. At first he had pushed the issue of adopting him, seeing as how he was the godfather already, and just being done with it, but his sensei, the Sandaime Hokage, had reassured him that he had that situation under control, and that controlling his spy network was more crucial at the moment, since they didn't know what to expect from either Orochimaru or Iwa. A week ago, while checking up on his network in AIM, he had run into who he had presumed to be Yahiko. However, when he noticed the Rinnegan, he knew something was wrong. He had spoken to Nagato and had discovered all that had happened with Hanzo and his betrayal, and the death of Yahiko. He had mourned the loss of his student, and asked if Nagato was ready to begin training Naruto yet, seeing as how the boy was of age. It had taken some convincing, but Nagato had actually sent two paths along with Jiraiya. Only one of them would be staying, the one that Konan had helped him make special for this mission. Well, Nagato, let's go see if we can find the Gaki. It's high time he starts hating life, Jiraiya joked, referencing the training he would soon be commencing. Nagato actually smiled a bit at this, remembering the hell that had been Jiraiya's training, before nodding. The two of them shunshined away, unaware of what would meet their eyes. Naruto was running as fast as he could. He had been kicked out of the orphanage about a week ago, and was having trouble finding a place to sleep without getting yelled at by some villager. This time he was caught sleeping behind a restaurant's dumpster, and the owner had furiously kicked the child into the street, throwing a metal pan and hitting him square in the head. Unfortunately, this had caused him to stumble into a woman who had groceries in her hand, forcing her to drop them. She had angrily kicked the boy to the ground in her fit of rage, screaming that the demon had attacked her. A mob had quickly gathered, and before he knew it, Naruto had bottles, wood, bricks, and even a few shuriken being thrown at him. He had started sprinting as fast as his legs would allow, tears streaming down his face the entire time. Why did everyone hate him? What did he do? Was it because he wasn't part of a clan? Because he was an orphan? Was it because he ate from people's trash cans? Were they mad because he had to rummage? Was it rude? He didn't know. All he knew was the searing back of beating after beating he had on a weekly basis. He tried to get to the old man like he was told to if these things happened, but the receptionist usually tossed him out before he even got the chance to knock on the Hokage's door. So he was left alone, afraid, and wanting to die. He turned a corner and blindly ran into a wall. A dead end. He turned around, his blue eyes filled with both tears and fear as the mob approached, all of them grinning like madmen. Ha, not so smart are you, demon. We have him cornered, we can finally avenge the Yondaime. Kill that little bastard, he took my father from me. Kill the demon. Slaughter that demon child. Naruto curled up as he quietly sobbed, yelping as the first of many kicks caught him in the ribs. The next 20 minutes were a pain-filled haze as bottles were smashed over his body, cuts were made everywhere imaginable, and every inch of his flesh was pounded by fists, feet, and blunt objects of all sizes. The mob heard an angry gasp come from a rooftop but paid it no mind. Ninja were usually lenient when they saw who it was they were assaulting. They had no idea that this time was different. Shinra Tensei. The mob were all blown towards the street as Jiraiya and Nagato dropped down to observe the bloody and broken child that was Naruto. Jiraiya was furious that these idiot villagers had the gall to beat a child in the name of the kid's father, not that anyone knew. Nagato had different memories floating through his mind, the night when he first learned what pain was. The night when his parents were killed before his eyes. This child may not have remembered his parents dying, but this. Nagato looked at the child, before advancing towards the soon-to-be-dead villagers. This child knew what pain meant, even if it wasn't the same type of pain. Nagato knew that he could train the child. The mob slowly got up, wondering what that force had been. There were only a few ninja within their ranks, mainly Chunin, that had wondered if there had been a Fuuten jutsu launched at them. Their heads all turned as a man in black cloak with red clouds came from the alley, his eyes closed. "Hey, are you the one that blew us away?" one of the Chunin shouted angrily. "Do you know who that even is? That's a goddamn demon you saved." The man didn't speak, he simply continued to walk forward until he was face to face with the supposed ringleader. The man confused this with a sort of apology, and he grinned fiercely, wondering what he could do with the newcomer's power. "Good, you understand. Now if you just come with us we can finally finish off that damn demon before he ca." The man was quickly silenced when Nagato gripped his head, before he picked him and held him above his head. "Shinra Tensei," he said, launching the man several hundred feet in the air, before he came back down, splattering against the ground. Many of the mob looked on in shock, a few of them losing their stomachs at the gory scene before them. "You murdered him," a civilian said, pointing a shaking finger at Nagato. "You are under arrest. Quickly, someone get the Hoka." "How about me instead?" Jiraiya said cheerfully, walking up behind the man and clapping him on the shoulder. The man visibly relaxed, before glaring at Nagato. "Master Jiraiya, this man just murdered a Chunin for no reason whatsoever. We need you to take him down." "Oh, are you sure he didn't have a reason?" Jiraiya asked, raising an eyebrow at the oblivious man. The villagers sure were stupid. "Nothing at all, Master Jiraiya. We were simply trying to avenge the Yondaime by killing the demon child." Jiraiya chuckled before suspending the man in midair with ninja wire before anyone had even noticed he moved. The man looked on horrified as Jiraiya waved a finger in front of his face in mock disappointment. S-ranked secrets are nothing to be careless about. "I guess this man was in the right after all," he exclaimed, before performing a few quick hand signs. "Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu," he exclaimed, before lighting the man ablaze. The rest of the mob, upon witnessing one of their Sannin light the poor man on fire, had decided to book it. Little did they know. "Bansho Tenin," Nagato exclaimed, pulling all the civilians and few shinobi back towards them as Jiraiya made 2 shadow clones and tied them all up. He looked at each of them in disgust before the original made his appearance, revealing that they had been talking to a third shadow clone the entire time. Jiraiya cradled Naruto, who was patched up as best as Jiraiya could do, in his arms. "How in the hell could you do this to a child?" he yelled, getting vehement glares from everyone except his student. "Master Jiraiya. Of all the people. To think that the demon has poisoned your mind as well as the Hokages, these are troubling times indeed," a middle-aged man said, shaking his head. "Is there no one left to see reason? See reason?" Jiraiya yelled, before sending a kunai through the man's eye, killing him instantly. All the other villagers starting to cower and sweat when the Sannin's killing intent spiked. "You think beating and torturing a 4-year-old boy is even close to reason? What the fuck is wrong with you all? He killed your student, the Yondaime. Why are you defending him? Kill that demon," one of the Chunin foolishly exclaimed. Jiraiya was about to kill the man, but stopped when he noticed Nagato picking up a pebble. He calmly walked over to the man and balanced it on top of his head. What the fuck are you doing? The man said in surprise, as Nagato covered his head and pebble with his hand. Shinra Tensai, he simply said, before pulling his hand away. Everyone was confused when he had stopped moving or saying anything, before several people gave alarmed yelps when he slumped over. Several people saw the pebble-sized hole in the top of his head and lost their lunches again. Others dry heaved at fact that this man had sent a tiny pebble through this man's entire body without batting an eyelid. Jiraiya shook his head, pissed off and wondering if this was what Naruto had to deal with for the 4 years he'd been busy. Biting his thumb and doing a few quick hand signs, he summoned one of his man-sized toads. Jiraiya-sama, he said with a surprised tone. It's always a pleasure, but may I ask why you summoned me? Jiraiya deposited Naruto onto his back, before silently moving all of the villagers into a tight group. He then cupped his hands, and using a few specially designed seals for enhancing his voice, yelled out in a voice that rang for about half a mile. See what happens when you try to kill the demon. Come now, to the vendor's plaza. He yelled, before sitting cross-legged on the ground, meditating. The young toad simply shrugged and restarted the sharpening of his swords. Nagato stood nearby, gazing at the young battered boy who was fitfully resting on the toad. In roughly 15 minutes a sizable crowd had gathered around the Sannin. Many were curious as to why a large ground of civilians were tied in on the ground, and even more were curious as to who the newcomer was and why he wore that strange cloak. But everyone was asking themselves the same question. Master Jiraiya, why is the demon on one of your toads? You should get him off BEF. The man found himself tied and thrown in with the group on the ground, everyone having a mild expression of shock on their face. Jiraiya turned towards the crowd angrily. This boy, this innocent little boy that I witnessed some of you hunting today. How long has this been going on? Nobody spoke a word until a woman shouted out. He isn't innocent, he's a goddamn demon. She was in the pile now too. Master Jiraiya, why are you punishing those that are trying to make Konoha better? That fool was added to the pile. Answer my question, he bellowed, taking note of the Anbu that began to gather on the rooftops. About 2 years Master Jiraiya. One man said fearfully, ever since he was released from the Sandame's care. Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose. 2 years, since this boy was 2 years old. Oil them up, Gato-san. What? The toad sputtered, they're just civilians. Jiraiya gave him a dark look. You condone the attempted murder of a 2-year-old? The toad shook his head, sighing. No, of course not. As you wish, he said, before flowing through a few hand signs and spewing a food amount of toad oil over the group. The civilians were angry, thinking that the Sannin was humiliating them for no good reason, but the shinobi knew what the true purpose for the oil was and were trying to get away, fearful of what was to come. Nagato prevented that however. You will all now know what happens when you threaten the life of Naruto Uzumaki. Jiraiya bellowed, before slowly and deliberately going through each hand sign. Snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger. Kaden. Endan. The entire group was set aflame, their screams of agony reaching across the village. Many of the Anbu were left speechless at the display, many of them questioning whether or not Jiraiya had the authority to perform public executions. A few jumped away to question the Sandame on whether or not this was acceptable. Jiraiya sighed and patted his friend's side. I'm sorry to make you do that, Gato-san, but a point had to be made. I only hope it was clear enough to the rest of these maggots. The toad nodded before grimacing. That was pretty brutal, if I may be so honest, Jiraiya-sama. The toad Sannin nodded, before gesturing to both the toad and Nagato. Come on, we have to go talk to sensei. You did what? Sarutobi yelled, clearly furious at the man in front of him. However, Jiraiya wasn't in the mood for playing games. Did you hear me, sensei? They were trying to murder Naruto. And this has been happening for 2 years. How did you not notice? He yelled in frustration, slamming his hands down on his desk. Hiruzen glared back for a moment, before sighing tiredly and leaning back in his chair. I had heard rumors, but I had to hope they weren't true. I've been so preoccupied by paperwork lately. We're only now returning to full strength since the Kyuubi attack. We've noticed movement on the Iwa borders and the council grew paranoid. I've had so many requests for sneak attacks and declarations of war go across my desk in the past few months. They're as common as new shinobi now. Jiraiya sighed as well and sat on the edge of his sensei's desk, feeling older than he had ever felt. Why didn't you just let me take the kid in when I asked to? Minato named me his godfather after all. I should have been able to take care of him. I know, you had every right, but we both know how valuable your informants are, Jiraiya. Plus, I suppose I had a little too much faith in the villagers. I knew they didn't exactly treat him as the hero Minato wanted, but I never imagined this. He shook his head in awe of how horrible the situation really was. Jiraiya nodded, not entirely blaming his sensei. Being taken out of retirement, and during such a stressful time, could not have done well on the man's nerves. Well, sensei, I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to be back here in Konoha for a few years, and I'm taking Naruto under my wing. Not only as my guardian but as my student. One of my former students from AIM will also be training him. Sarutobi eyed Jiraiya strangely, not entirely understanding how actions. I understand giving Naruto-kun a family. Kami knows he deserves it. But why are you taking it upon yourself to train him? Jiraiya chuckled, scratching the back of his head. I figure it's the least I owe him, not being there the first 4 years of his life. Plus, I want to see him turn out even better than Minato. He said, a tinge of excitement in his voice. Hiruzen nodded, before grabbing some paperwork from seemingly nowhere. He signed a few places, wrote a few things down, and stamped it before handing it to Jiraiya. Here, this is the deed to a new house that was recently built inside one of our more underused training grounds. It was meant to be a training house of sorts, but I figure this will give you a little more seclusion. I will also label that training ground as private, so you won't have to worry about random shinobi deciding to test explosive tags on your house. Jiraiya nodded, smiling as he picked up the still sleeping Naruto. Thanks sensei, I'll let you know how the Gaki likes it. Sarutobi smiled for the first time all day, chuckling softly. Yes, I certainly hope you do. I want to know if he finds it fitting. Naruto sat up shakily, eyeing the men in front of him. The last he remembered, the villagers were stabbing and beating him, and he wasn't sure he would have got out alive that time. The two men didn't notice him yet. It looked like they were having a serious discussion. One of them had long spiky white hair, with an outfit that he hadn't seen on anyone else in the village. The other man had on a black cloak with red clouds, orange hair, and seemed to have piercings everywhere. They seemed an unlikely pair, and Naruto didn't like anything that was unusual. It usually spelt pain for him. "WH. Who or why you two?" he asked hastily, ready to bolt at the first mention of the word demon. The white-haired man smiled at him, turning to eye him happily. "Speak of the devil, you've finally woken up. How do you feel, Gaki? Anything hurt?" Naruto shook his head slowly, climbing over the armrest of the couch and inching his way towards the door. "Nothing. I'm gonna go now." The man frowned, taking a step forward. "Now hang on." Naruto turned and bolted. These men had him all alone. He had to get somewhere with ninja that the old man commanded so he wouldn't be hurt. Suddenly he felt his feet leave the ground as he was lifted by the back of his shirt up into the air. He looked around, panic-stricken, trying to find a way out. There were trees everywhere, and he could hear a river. They had him isolated, he didn't have any idea where he was. The blonde began to cry, trying weakly to escape the stranger's grasp. Please let me go. I didn't do anything. Don't hurt me," he yelled, pulling at his shirt, trying to get it off so he could run. He felt the man began to bring him towards his chest and he cowered, awaiting the kunai fist that would inflict pain on him again. What he didn't expect was for the man to pull him into a tight hug, rubbing the top of his head. "Hey, don't be scared, I'm not here to hurt you, Gaki. I'm not like those stupid villagers, I'm here to keep you safe. I'm your godfather after all," he added, smiling at the shocked look on the boy's face. You're my godfather?" the boy asked incredulously. I have family." Jiraiya nodded, ruffling the boy's hair. "Jiraiya of the Sannin, at your service." Naruto looked into Jiraiya's eyes, feeling his eyes grow wet again. I have family. I have family. I have family. I have a family," he shouted, smiling largely and hugging the man tightly, as if he might disappear in a cruel illusion. Jiraiya smiled sadly at the enthusiasm the boy showed at the fact that he simply existed. He shot a look over at Nagato, who was eyeing the boy stoically. To the trained eye, however, one could see that he was looking sentimental, and a little sad. Luckily for Jiraiya, he possessed trained eyes. That's right. And from here on out, I'm gonna take care of ya. This here is our new home. Say, have you ever thought about being a shinobi? He asked, laughing at the boy's bright smile. It's all I've wanted to do since I was little. So I could defend myself from the villagers, and make them acknowledge me. Naruto said, bouncing around the man and prodding at anything that was unfamiliar to him. Hey Jiraiya-Gigi, what's this giant scroll for? Why do you wear weird wooden sandals? Why does your forehead thingy have horns? You have a big wart on your nose. Jiraiya's eye twitched as he picked the kid up again, looking at him with an annoyed gaze. Maybe he shouldn't have taken this kid in after all. He blinked when Naruto suddenly started floating away from him. He looked at Nagato, who had his hand out, drawing the now panicking Naruto to him. What the heck? Why am I floating? Jiraiya-Gigi, help me. Ah! He yelled, flailing his limbs around uselessly. Calm down Gaki, that is going to be one of your personal sensei, so show him some respect. Jiraiya said, fixing Naruto with a serious stare. Naruto gulped, before turning back to the man who had him suspended in midair. He tried his best to bow, but he instead began to slowly rotate in place. It's nice to meet you, Nagato. The man said, his face as pensive as always. Nagato-sensei. Naruto said happily, looking at the man with interest. Nay, Nagato-sensei, why are there clouds on your coat? Why are your eyes purple? Are those rings? Why do you have so many piercings? Your pants go under your sandals, doesn't that get in your way? How did you get me to float like that? How? Be quiet, Naruto. Nagato said, setting the boy down. The first lesson starts now, stealth. Go and hide yourself among the foliage outside of the house. You must conceal yourself and remain undetected for 5 minutes before we move on to another subject. Go now. Naruto's eyes glinted mischievously before bolting out of the door, leaving it swinging open. Jiraiya gave Nagato a raised eyebrow, to which Nagato shrugged slightly. The boy has obviously never had a childhood he could enjoy, so why not give him a game to play? I believe it called hide and seek? Plus, having stealth really could save his life. It seemed the most appropriate thing to do. Jiraiya laughed heartily, clapping his old student on the back. Yes, it was. Well, if you've got things down here, I need to go do a little research, he said with a perverted smile, before poofing into smoke and disappearing. Nagato started blankly at the spot where his sensei vanished before looking outside. He could sense there was something different with this boy. Maybe he would postpone his plans a little longer until he figured out if this boy would meet his standards. 1 year later, Naruto was panting, hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. What the hell was Nagato thinking? He had barely dodged that barrage of kunai he had thrown at him, and had he been a split second later in throwing himself off that cliff, he would have been skewered. Of course, then he had to deal with the cliff he had just jumped off. Thank Kami he had extra ninja wire and a kunai, so that when he lodged the kunai into the cliff face he swung on the line like a rope, before using chakra to make his way back up. Nagato walked up to him, smirking slightly at the blonde as he glared at him. That was most impressive, Naruto. I was surprised you got out of it unscathed. Nagato said, a hint of pride in his voice. For the past year he had trained Naruto in everything from physical conditioning to weapon skills. He had yet to touch on ninjutsu, since he wanted to unlock Naruto's eyes in order to speed up his training. He had yet to find a way, and it was frustrating him to no end. Was that old sage really speaking the truth when he said Naruto had the Rinnegan? You bastard! Naruto yelled, gasping as he expended the little breath he had in his lungs. You almost killed me. I was lucky to get out of that like I did, he said, standing up and stretching out his body. Now that this had happened, he would be sour for the other half of today's training. Nagato narrowed his eyes at him, using his eyes to bring Naruto into his open hand. Naruto yelped as he was smacked in midair, causing him to flip out of control and crash into a tree. Ouch! What the hell was that for? Naruto exclaimed angrily, rubbing his now sore head. Fool! If you would look beyond the surface meaning of things, you would see that I meant to do each thing that I did as a test for your current abilities. You passed flawlessly, albeit your abhorrent attitude, Nagato said, showing no emotion as he stared down at the embarrassed blonde. He had real talent when it came to hard work and understanding, but holy hell did he need to broaden his mind. Sorry Nagato ni. Naruto said sheepishly, rubbing his head again. He smiled suddenly, pumping his arm in excitement. I was pretty cool though, huh? How I swung on my wire and then walked all the way up the wall. Like a real ninja. Nagato shook his head, amused at the boy's switch in emotions. As I said before, your reaction was impressive. All that's left is for you to keep working your body towards its limits so that you may grow stronger, and to practice your taijutsu. For now, however, Jiraiya-sensei and I feel that we may have found a way to unlock a new power in you. We will discuss it at the house. Nagato then took off to go report the day's activities to the Hokage, who was eager to learn the blonde's developments. Naruto took off at a leisurely pace, happily inhaling the scent of the woods around him. It was always so peaceful here, so serene. Much better than his old life of living in dumpsters, hoping to scavenge a morsel of food now and again to survive. His life had changed drastically since Jiraiya and Nagato had saved him. He had a family now, he had someone to help feed him, someone to be there for him, to help him grow. For once in his life, he could be a kid. He wasn't forced to fight simply to survive. Now he fought because he wanted to grow stronger to protect what he had. He walked into the cabin, taking a seat next to the real Nagato, who was hooked up to several machines. He nodded to Naruto before focusing his attention on the door, which opened up again to reveal Jiraiya. He smiled at Naruto before sitting down cross-legged, grinning like a madman. "Aro Gigi, why do you look so happy?" Naruto asked, wondering what had the man in such a good mood. Jiraiya took a good look at Naruto before turning his attention to Nagato. "I think I found a way to unlock Naruto's Rinnegan, as well as heal you fully." Nagato's eyes widened, his mouth opening slightly from shock. "You, what? How?" he asked, now believing what he was hearing. Jiraiya's face fell serious before he turned to Naruto. "Naruto, I know you've wondered why the villagers call you a monster or a demon, right?" Naruto's face grew somber as he nodded, sadness leaking into his voice. "Ever since I was little, I've always wondered. They never told me though, I asked every time." Jiraiya nodded. "Naruto, what I'm about to tell you is an S-class secret, punishable by death for even speaking of it." Naruto gasped as Jiraiya pressed on. "Everyone but you. You see, the Yondaime didn't actually kill the Kyuubi. Killing a being of pure chakra is nearly impossible, so he did the next best thing. He sealed it away." Naruto's face formed an O as he processed everything that was being thrown at him. "Wait, the Kyuubi didn't die? He was sealed. You can seal things that big?" he shouted with a spark in his eye. Jiraiya nodded with a laugh. "You sure can Gaki. In fact, after we unlock your eyes, we'll start your training in Fuinjutsu. But anyways, yes, the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi away. Into an infant, in fact, since you can't put a being with that much power into some scroll." His eyes grew steely as he prepared to drop the bomb. "That child was you, Naruto." Naruto stopped, his face frozen as he began to piece together everything. The room was silent, the slight rustling of leaves outside the only proof that time had not stopped. Jiraiya held his breath, waiting for Naruto to make an indication that he had heard what he said. Suddenly Naruto nodded, half smiling at the Sannin. "I guess. That explains a lot, Aro Gigi. Thanks for telling me." Jiraiya frowned a bit at Naruto's response, but shrugged it off. He'd talk to him later. "Naruto, do not mistake yourself being the Kyuubi with being its jailer. It is sealed within you and nothing more. However, the seal was designed to allow you to have access to its chakra. You noticed that your healing is completely nuts, right?" Naruto nodded, grinning at the useful ability. The training may be rough, but he was almost never sore, and any cuts or scraped he got were healed within minutes. That's because of the fox's chakra. It allows you that ability. Now Nagato, you said that you can absorb chakra, right? Nagato nodded, his eyes narrowing at the implications. If he could absorb some of the Kyuubi's chakra, what would happen if my system were to reject the Kyuubi's chakra? He asked, slightly fearful of the Toad Sage's answer. Jiraiya closed his eyes and thought. If it were a minuscule amount, nothing serious. Some chakra burns, maybe, minor damage to your system. Nothing we couldn't fix. That's why I'm suggesting a trial run. Absorb a little a day for about a week and see where it leads us. If the results are positive, we might be able to have you at full power in a month. I'm no medic, but with the healing rate the fox has, you should be back on your own feet in no time. Nagato smiled, a rare occurrence for him. An eyebrow shifted upward when a thought came to mind. How will the Kyuubi assist with awakening his dojutsu? Jiraiya smiled, leaning back. To be honest, I have no clue. Both Naruto and Nagato face vaulted at this, Naruto getting up quickly with an annoyed look on his face. Then why would you tell me I could get IT? He shouted, crossing his arms. Jiraiya laughed again. Because, having the fox's chakra in your system may help spark any bloodlines you possess. There's an old myth that bloodlines were originally created from humans tampering with tailed beasts. Since you possess one, all it would take is a little demonic chakra to awaken any that you already have. Naruto's smile grew wider throughout the entire explanation, before he jumped for joy at the end. I'm gonna have a bloodline. I'll have the same eyes as Nagato ni. I'll go train a little bit more to show you I'm ready. He shouted, before rushing out to the training log outside to begin taijutsu on it. Jiraiya turned to Nagato, his smile vanishing instantly. Have you known about the Kyuubi? I'm assuming you have by your earlier reaction. Nagato nodded, as Jiraiya's muscles tensed. What will you do about it? I know about your plan, and he's one of the keys that you need. Nagato leveled a glare at the Sannin. Just because I know, does not mean that I will betray his trust and take his biju. As I said, that was a contingency plan in case this one did not look promising. Even then, I would wait until he was the last so that he had a fighting chance. I do not betray those who give me their trust, you should know that, sensei. Jiraiya nodded, his hand slipping off the kunai he had been fingering. I understand, Nagato, but you can never be too careful. Especially with the world that we live in today. He sighed heavily, looking out the door and watching the blonde pummel the training post with reckless abandon. That boy may be our only chance at peace, and I can't risk anyone hurting him. You won't be able to protect him forever, Jiraiya-sensei. Nagato said, also watching the boy. Jiraiya chuckled, taking out his notepad and writing a few things down. You're right, but I can sure as hell make him unbeatable before I go. Jiraiya turned to Nagato, his smile vanishing instantly. Have you known about the Kyuubi? I'm assuming you have by your earlier reaction. Nagato nodded, as Jiraiya's muscles tensed. What will you do about it? I know about your plan, and he's one of the keys that you need. Nagato leveled a glare at the Sannin. Just because I know, does not mean that I will betray his trust and take his biju. As I said, that was a contingency plan in case this one did not look promising. Even then, I would wait until he was the last so that he had a fighting chance. I do not betray those who give me their trust, you should know that, sensei. Jiraiya nodded, his hand slipping off the kunai he had been fingering. I understand, Nagato, but you can never be too careful. Especially with the world that we live in today. He sighed heavily, looking out the door and watching the blonde pummel the training post with reckless abandon. That boy may be our only chance at peace, and I can't risk anyone hurting him. You won't be able to protect him forever, Jiraiya-sensei. Nagato said, also watching the boy. Jiraiya chuckled, taking out his notepad and writing a few things down. You're right, but I can sure as hell make him unbeatable before I go. 2 weeks later, Naruto tightened his eyes, straining to grasp that small amount of red chakra Nagato had pulled from within him. It was like an extremely slimy tentacle, it just kept slipping out of his grasp, and the tighter he tried to squeeze the slippier it was. It was just so infuriating. He sighed as he let his concentration lapse, before getting blasted with a jet of water from the pond behind him, sending him face-first into the ground. He sputtered for a moment, raising his head to glare at a laughing Sannin. Oi, Arrow Gigi, what was that for? Naruto yelled, shaking a fist at the man. Jiraiya laughed even harder, clapping his knee. Well, aha. Firstly, it entertained me. He smiled, before a serious look crossed his face. Secondly, and more importantly, you lost focus. This is something you need to conquer, Naruto, and it won't come natural. Naruto's face fell slightly, as he nodded. I know. But, it's just so hard, he said, before sitting back on the flat rock he had been on before. But I'll keep trying. I know it's important. Jiraiya nodded happily, glad that his student understood the value of hard work. Since Nagato had begun drawing on minute amounts of chakra from the fox, his devastated body had slowly begun to heal. In the few weeks they had been doing it, he already had the full use of his legs back. He was still weak in his upper body, and his midsection was frail, but he could walk. And that was more than he ever thought would be possible again. Naruto swam inside his mind, trying to find that hint of red that sat on the edges of his consciousness. Right after Nagato absorbed a bit of his chakra was usually the easiest time to find it, but after a few hours had passed, like today, it was almost impossible. Finally, the faintest flicker of color appeared, and Naruto made a snag for it. It slipped. Naruto slumped as he failed again to grasp the weird chakra. Somehow, it felt like it just wasn't the right time. He voiced these opinions to Jiraiya, who eyes him critically. "Why do you think that, Naruto? Did Nagato say that? Or someone else?" he asked curiously, handing the boy a popsicle. Naruto shook his head, licking the treat. "No arrow Gigi, it's just a gut feeling that I have. That I shouldn't try and pull on the red string yet. I think I need to get stronger first before I can." Jiraiya bit off a piece of his own popsicle and contemplated the situation. Everything was a wild card when it came to Biju. Hell, just look at his old apprentice. On the road to being good as new by taking what would be a hair on its leg's worth of chakra. And the thing inside Naruto, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, was the most powerful of them all. Normally, he would hear nothing of listening to a 5-year-old's gut feeling, but this child was not only Minato's son, but he was the one with the demon inside of him. It was a confusing situation. Alright Gaki, I suppose I agree with you. We'll stop this training for now, but we're increasing your physical conditioning, and we're going to start leaning on survival training. Understood? Naruto nodded, smiling and leaning against the Sannin. Of course Gigi. Thanks for trusting me. Jiraiya smiled softly and ruffled the boy's hair. Of course Gaki, anytime. 1 year later. Come on Arrow Gigi. Come on, I can't be late or my new sensei will have my head. Naruto shouted, pulling Jiraiya by the hand through the village. Most of the villagers were regarding him with disgust, but no one was openly voicing their hatred. The memory of almost 100 villagers being roasted alive wasn't forgotten. Jiraiya laughed, picking Naruto up with one hand and watching as he squirmed. You're gonna be fine Gaki, don't be so anxious. Your sensei won't be mad if you're not 30 minutes early. I thought you wanted to stop to get ramen? Naruto stopped squirming for a second before he started back up. Yay, let's get ramen quick so I can get there on time. Luckily, Jiraiya had predicted this and they were already right next to Ichiraku, which Naruto had developed a loving relationship with. Naruto plopped down in his seat and smiled brightly when Tucci came to the counter. Naruto-kun, how's my favorite customer doing today? He said brightly, also waving to Jiraiya. I'm doing great Tucci-san. Can I get 2 bowls of miso pork please? Only 2 bowls? Has my ramen lost its flavor Naruto? Tucci asked, mock horror on his face. Naruto's eyes widened to the size of plates. Of course not, Ichiraku ramen is always amazing. He shouted, before being bopped on his head by Jiraiya. He sat back down from the seat he had stood up on, before smiling brightly again. I start at the Ninja Academy today. I can't be late. Tucci laughed slightly, giving Naruto a clap on the shoulder. Oh, so today is the day? Well, I'll get that ramen for you right away then, so that you can have the strength to blow everyone out of the water. Naruto nodded, smiling as the man went in the back to prepare his treat. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto proudly. In the past 2 years, Naruto had come a long way. He was as physically fit as a boy his age could be, along with being naturally agile. He could say without a doubt that Naruto could survive for as long as need be in any environment, even any unfamiliar to him. He and Nagato had hammered into the boy what could and couldn't be eaten, and the basic means of survival. After they were sure he could accomplish the basics, they had moved on to ninjutsu and taijutsu, Jiraiya deciding to leave fuinjutsu until his academy years so that he could work his brain all at once. He adopted the basic taijutsu stance Jiraiya had taught him fairly well, and could be fluid in its practice. Ninjutsu, however, had a bit of a different start. Naruto learned the kawarimi and henjutsu fairly fast, but whenever it came to a bunshin he just couldn't seem to do it. All of his clones ended up half dead and on the ground, if they came out at all. Jiraiya had meditated on it, before coming up with a solution. He taught Naruto a completely different jutsu, the Kage Bunshin. He felt that perhaps the Kyuubi's chakra had increased Naruto's capacity by a considerate amount, affecting his chakra control, which would explain his miserable excuses for clones. Sure enough, when Naruto used Kage Bunshin, roughly 4 dozen other Narutos appeared. Jiraiya let out a low whistle. This kid wasn't even on the ground, instead he had already made and was playing a game with all of his clones. His chakra capacity had to be absolutely nuts. Since Jiraiya found out the boy could use the Kage Bunshin to such an extent, his training capacity increased tenfold. With physical clones, they could memorize different katas, using muscle memory to help teach Naruto different taijutsu styles. Ninjutsu training could go a lot faster too, he had realized. He remembered the day he had given Naruto his slip of chakra paper, it was too damn funny. 4 months earlier. Huh? What's this Arojiji? Naruto asked curiously, looking at the paper from all angles as if trying to discover its secret. Jiraiya laughed at the boy's curiosity before holding up a similar piece of paper. This is called chakra paper. When you channel your chakra through it, one of 5 things will occur, or a combination of those 5 things, which will determine your chakra nature. Naruto bounced around excitedly, holding his slip of paper like it determined his fate for all of eternity. Oh man, really? Does that mean I get to start doing cool jutsu like you and Nagato ni? Jiraiya nodded. Like me? For the most part, yes. But you've still got to unlock that red chakra before we've even got a shot at you doing the same jutsu as Nagato. Now, if you're a wind nature, the paper will split in 2. If you're water, it will dampen, if lightning, it will crumple, if fire, it will become singed, and if earth, it will crumble. Understood? Naruto nodded, before adopting a serious look on his face. He channeled his chakra into the paper, watching as it split in 2 before both pieces caught fire slightly. Jiraiya's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Fire users were common, after all, they were from the fire country, but wind? There was only one other wind-style user in Konoha, to his knowledge, not counting Nagato. Naruto was bouncing around Jiraiya again, causing a tick mark to appear on the elder man's forehead. Awesome, I got fire like you but I also got wind. Ahe. Ehehe. Ahaha. Jiraiya watched in utter confusion as Naruto began rolling on the ground laughing for all he was worth. He knelt down by the boy, picking him up by the back of his shirt as he continued laughing and clutching his stomach. Oi, Naruto, what's so funny about this? You've got good elements, ones that coincide with each other actually. You'll be able to make some pretty powerful combinations when you're fast enough to shoot them right after another. He said, only for Naruto to start laughing even harder. He rolled his eyes and plopped the boy back on the ground, waiting out this sudden laughing fit. Naruto wiped a few tears from his eyes and sat up, taking in large gulps of air. Aha. Haha, sorry Arojiji, it's just, this is perfect. Naruto shouted, fist pumping into the air. Jiraiya tilted his head, conveying his confusion. For what? Playing pranks? Naruto shouted, rubbing his hands together mischievously. With fire jutsu I can just heat someone foul-smelling up, and then with wind I can blow it throughout an entire building. Easy stink bombs. I never have to wait for the right draft again, or pay for specially heated devices, or... Naruto kept going, but Jiraiya had a look of disbelief on his face. This boy had 2 extremely powerful offensive nature types, and his first thought was to use them to prank people. Granted, he was already known as a huge trickster, bringing misfortune on anyone who outed him in public, but Jiraiya thought he would have thought of how cool it would have been to fire off air and flames in combination of each other. He sighed, before chuckling with the boy. Nagato walked up from the trees, holding his own slip of paper. Naruto trailed off as he saw his surrogate brother stand next to him and hold up his item. He watched in amazement as the paper split in half, one half becoming crumpled and burnt, while the other grew damp before crumbling out of existence. These eyes, the same ones that you will possess one day, allows this. Control of all 5 chakra natures. Remember this, Naruto, he said, before turning around and walking off. If possible, Naruto looked even more excited. Oh man, that's right. I totally forgot that I would get those crazy eyes like Nagato ni, he said, causing Jiraiya to face vault. This kid forgot that he would be getting the eyes of God? Naruto turned around, taking on that serious look in his eyes again. I'm ready to start jutsu training Arojiji. How many clones for taijutsu? Jiraiya allowed himself a small smile before also getting serious. 200 for taijutsu, have them split into groups of 50 for the 4 styles you've learned so far. Summon up 400 for ninjutsu, and we'll split that group into 2 parts, one half for wind, one half for fire. Before we can use actual jutsu, we need to learn to access these natures. And yes, it is much easier than summoning your Biju chakra. He added, noticing the slightly panicked look on Naruto's face. After we train for a few hours this way, we'll do a large spar, you against each of your groups of clones. Remember, each of the styles we taught you can counter another, so it's up to you to figure the best one to use and use them against each of your groups accordingly. Understood? Hi, Aro-sensei, Naruto said, before summoning his clones and going to work. Present day, he had come a long way. He could already do several C-rank fire and wind jutsu, and was at a decent speed in flipping through hand signs. If he had a 50-foot advantage on his opponent, Naruto could easily combine a fire and wind jutsu together, something that Chunin would be lucky to be able to do with a partner. He knew almost 8 fighting styles, and how to spot the weaknesses of another. Doing this, he could counter anyone in taijutsu, if his speed allowed it. His chakra control was still abysmal, but he was improving. He could walk up trees fine, and was getting the hang of walking on water. He was proficient in kunai and shuriken, and was training in throwing a few other commonly found weapons, should he happen to scavenge them in the field. All in all, Jiraiya would rank him a mid-chunin at this point, however rules were rules and he still had to go through the academy. Jiraiya paid for them both as they started down the main road, heading towards the school. Naruto was loudly boasting about how he would be Rookie of the Year in his graduating class, making remarks on how he would be kicking everyone's ass, causing Jiraiya to chuckle at the boy's antics. As they neared the building, Naruto grew quiet, suddenly looking very somber. Jiraiya picked up on this and knelt next to him. Naruto, what's wrong? You've been looking forward to this, you know. Naruto nodded, sending a longing glance at the building in front of him. I know. But a lot of those kids hate me. What if I can't make any friends? He asked, his eyes large and frightened. Jiraiya frowned, cursing the stupid villagers for being as ignorant as they were. You'll find at least one person, Naruto, just find the one that doesn't glare at you, and sit next to them. Make friends with them, and be close to them. Alright? The Sannin stood up, rubbing Naruto's hair. You'll be fine, Gaki. Remember, you could take every single kid in that class, and maybe even the teacher. Naruto smiled at this, before nodding and making his way inside. Jiraiya watched him go, as Tendo Pain dropped down next to him. You know I don't approve of him going through this academy you have. This will impede his progress, and I want his eyes unlocked as soon as pos. I know that, Nagato. Jiraiya said, eyeing the body of his deceased student critically. You need to stop being impatient with it. When the time comes, it will come, you know this as well as I do. I know you want someone to share your feelings of wielding those eyes, but you're being selfish. He's just a kid. Pain stood there watching the building a while longer, before bowing his head and leaping away. Jiraiya sighed, looking towards the Hokage Tower. Maybe I need to have another chat with Sensei. With Naruto. Naruto walked through the unfamiliar halls, children walking on either side of him. Most of them ignored him, just marking him down as another body, but a few recognized him and shoved themselves against the wall, trying to get as far away from him as possible. Naruto kept his head down as he tried desperately to find his room as fast as possible. 101, 102, 104. There it was. 106. He slipped into the room, before turning to see the entire class looking at him. Hey, I know you. You're that little freak that my mom told me to stay away from, a pink-haired girl yelled out, before she stuck her tongue out at him. A blonde girl at her side nodded, also sticking her tongue out. Yeah, stay away from us, weirdo. Naruto winced, taking a step back towards the door. He didn't like this. Most of the student body was eyeing him now, sizing him up. The girl's declaration of him being a freak, and for her mom to tell her to stay away? Most of the class now knew who the girl was talking of, and Naruto could feel the bitter glares driving into his body. Every single person in this class hated him. He reached for the door, before a small movement from the top row caught his eye. There was a girl there, a small girl, with violet hair and pupilless eyes, who wasn't glaring at him. She looked like she was shy, and blushing almost, but she wasn't glaring. You'll find at least one person, Naruto, Just find the one that doesn't glare at you, and sit next to them. Make friends with them, and be close to them. Alright? Those were the words his godfather gave him. And he had no reason to disbelieve him. Students watched as he sucked in a huge breath and walked to the stairs in the middle of the class and ascended them to sit right next to the girl he had deemed somewhat friendly. As their teacher walked in, they all averted their eyes back to the front, eager to start their training. Naruto glanced at the girl next to him, who was now sporting a blush and rubbing her index fingers together. He saw the teacher arranging his papers and decided that now was as good a time as any. "Hey," he whispered, causing the girl to stiffen. "My name is Naruto, what's yours?" The girl looked down and was quiet, and Naruto started to think that he had the wrong impression. This girl hated him too, she just wasn't rude about it. He felt tears begin to pool in his eyes, before he heard a slight murmur. "Huh? I'm sorry I didn't hear you," he whispered, hoping that he was right. The girl blushed again before looking into Naruto's eyes, causing her to gasp slightly and smile. "Hinata." "Hey," he whispered, causing the girl to stiffen. "My name is Naruto, what's yours?" The girl looked down and was quiet, and Naruto started to think that he had the wrong impression. This girl hated him too, she just wasn't rude about it. He felt tears begin to pool in his eyes, before he heard a slight murmur. Huh? I'm sorry I didn't hear you," he whispered, hoping that he was right. The girl blushed again before looking into Naruto's eyes, causing her to gasp slightly and smile. "Hinata." 2 months later. Naruto yawned loudly, stretching out on the grass as his lunch buddy sat next to him, looking at his laziness with a hint of disapproval. "Man, do I hate history lessons," Naruto griped, scratching his head and taking a bite of the apple he had brought with. "I don't care about what Gigi did to make the council shut up or what the other old Hokage geezers did with the council or anything, it's so boring. But we need to learn about how the village is the way it is now. Politics is a really big deal, Naruto-kun," Hinata said, poking him in the middle of his forehead shyly. Naruto's eyebrows wrinkled. "Blah. You're probably right, Hinata-chan, I just don't like having to hear it. I'd rather learn some of the jutsu they knew," he exclaimed, before jumping up and punching the air, a large smile on his face. Hinata giggled at his antics before digging into her own lunchbox, watching Naruto punch and kick the air in several different forms. So far he was unmatched in taijutsu, but dead last when it came to academics. They were starting weapons training soon, but she figured that he'd be the best in that as well. In a few weeks' time they would start with basic chakra control and ninjutsu, but since most of the class members were from clans they would probably skip through most of the basics. Normally she'd be worried about how well Naruto would do, but after following him hanging out with him the past 2 months, she'd learned a good deal about the young blonde. 1 month prior. Hinata was shaking a little, partly because Naruto was holding her by the hand and pulling her along, but mostly because she was in a dark forest that creeped her out. Naruto-kun. "I don't think we should be here," she called out quietly, but he just pulled her along even more urgently. "Of course we should be, this is where I live," Naruto said brightly, before she noticed his ears twitch. Several things happened simultaneously, and she doubted she would ever forget this moment. A large beetle thing flew from a tree near them, easily her size, and made a beeline straight for her. Naruto was flying through hand signs at a speed that she only saw Junin in her clan do, before multiple blades of wind sliced through the beetle like a hot knife through butter, dicing it into several parts that fell to the ground. All of this happened before she got a chance to scream. Naruto turned around, a sheepish grin on his face. "Sorry, Hinata-chan. I was hoping that those big buggers wouldn't be around, but it looks like I didn't sense it. Are you okay?" he asked worriedly, placing his hand on her forehead. She promptly passed out in his arms, to which he freaked out too and ran her quickly to his home. When she came to a little bit later, she saw Jiraiya of the Sannin karate chopping the top of Naruto's skull, making him whine in pain. "Jiraiya Gigi, what was that for?" Naruto said, rubbing his sore cranium. "For not being more careful. I told you that this is the mating season for those accursed bugs and the Aburame won't let me mess with them. If they discover that you sliced one up they'll have both mine and your head for sure. We need to cover this up. Also, you almost got her hurt, Gaki. I told you to protect the one who cares about you, not get a damned insect to attack her." Jiraiya scolded, to which Naruto bowed his head in shame. I understand Jiraiya-Gigi, Naruto said, before looking back towards Hinata who was still listening curiously to the conversation. Hinata-chan, he exclaimed, before leaping over and hugging her, causing her face to flush crimson. Jiraiya chuckled before removing the hyperactive blonde from the poor girl. Calm down there, sport. Are you alright, Hinata? Sorry that you were almost carried away by a giant insect, but I'm glad to see that this knucklehead can handle that small of a task at this point. Hinata nodded, still slightly confused, before looking back at the old man. You're Jiraiya of the Sannin, right? Jiraiya struck a dramatic pose. The one and only. Naruto deadpanned. No one will ever be impressed by that. I hope you realize that, Gigi. A tick mark appeared on Jiraiya's forehead before he chopped Naruto again. Now, what can I do for you, young heiress? Hinata blushed, before looking to the side. How? Does Naruto-kun know such high-level jutsu? Is he already through the academy? Jiraiya scratched his head. I'm in a predicament now, aren't I? Ah geez. Is it okay to tell her Gaki? Can I trust her? He asked Naruto, knowing that the boy's judgment would be best in this situation. Naruto nodded excitedly. Yeah, Hinata-chan is really cool and really nice to me, and it isn't just so that she can hit me when my back is turned. He trailed off, a sad look on his face as he relived some harsh memories. Hinata looked confused at his words but didn't comment on them, and Jiraiya did the same. Alright then, Hinata-chan, while you don't have to listen to me, I would prefer if you did in this instance when I ask you to not let anyone know what I'm about to tell you, okay? He said, to which the young girl nodded hesitantly. I won't tell anyone about Naruto-kun, she said, a little spark in her eye. Jiraiya smiled. Alright. Well, I've been training the Gaki here with another student of mine for a couple months, and I have to say that he's probably nearing high Chunin level in skill right now. He could probably take your instructor, although it would be a close match if neither were to underestimate the other. And that's only because your instructor is very good at thinking on his feet. This little guy is pretty good at that too. In fact, I'd say he was a genius on the battlefield, although he's practically a failure when it comes to academics. He should get better though. He trailed off, probably thinking of another grueling training session for the now panicking blonde who was trying to talk Jiraiya out of it. But Hinata saw none of that, as her mind was racing. Chunin level? Take our instructor? But he's been a shinobi for years, and he's really good. Could Naruto be that good? I haven't actually gotten to see any of his fights, but I heard he's won them all, even though they've just against not that good opponents. Isn't he supposed to fight Sasuke tomorrow? She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't notice when an annoyed Naruto was poking her in the cheek. Hinata-chan, he called, come on, let's go get some ramen. Hinata blushed, before nodding. Alright Naruto-kun. Wait, did you get your wallet then? Naruto nodded, bringing his frog wallet out. Yep, I'll never forget it again, just in case Iruka-sensei decides to give us a longer lunch again so I can go get ramen. Hinata giggled, always finding humor in the boy's love of ramen. It was good, she would admit, but it wasn't nearly as good as cinnamon buns. Naruto started pulling her along as she got lost in her thoughts again. Come on, I'm hungry. The next day, Naruto stood passively, the large grin on his face now substituted with a calm look, as he stared down his opponent at the opposite end of the ring they were in. What's wrong, Dobi? Scared that I'll beat you in one strike? Sasuke Uchiha taunted. Come on, I'll give you one free hit to even it up. No you won't, Naruto said, his eyes narrowing slightly. I hate liars. Sasuke sneered. You would know a thing or two about hate, wouldn't you? Does anyone even like you? Naruto winced, and Sasuke took his opportunity. He rushed forward, throwing out his right fist as a fake before following up with a left roundhouse. Naruto acted on instinct, falling back on his hands and kicking forward in a sort of reverse mule kick, catching Sasuke in the arm and knocking him to the ground. Sasuke quickly leapt away, an annoyed look on his face. Looks like I might have to actually put in effort. Be honored, Dobi, I never go full out, but when I'm done they may be checking you into the hospital. Naruto didn't say a word, just looked towards Hinata and flashed her a large smile before he disappeared. Hinata gasped, and looked over to where Sasuke was now hunched over Naruto's fist, which was embedded in his gut. There was a larger, collective gasp when everyone realized that the dead last and hated of the class had just beat Sasuke, who was considered a potential prodigy with the skill he demonstrated, with one strike. Naruto removed his fist, watching as Sasuke slumped to the ground clutching his stomach. "Try to know your opponent before threatening them so much," Naruto said, a slightly cold tone to his voice. Hinata watched as he turned to walk back into the classroom, but a slight movement moved her attention. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched Sasuke start to get up and sprint silently towards Naruto, hate in his eyes and intending to hit him from behind. "Naruto!" she screamed, and saw him whip around to look at her. He caught sight of Sasuke's fist in his peripheral, and bent back avoiding the punch. He grabbed the arm and pulled it down, starting to flip the raven-haired boy over, but when he was parallel with the ground he drove a knee up into his gut, knocking the wind out of him. He then followed up with an elbow to the back, driving the Uchiha to the ground where he yelped in pain and was still. Naruto looked down at Sasuke and then back towards the class, where almost all of the females were looking horrified. Sasuke-kun?" Sakura whispered, taking a step forward, before glaring fearfully at Naruto. You demon, you hurt Sasuke-kun, get out," she screamed, to which the other girls started voicing the same. Hinata watched as Naruto slowly cringed back from their words, before he started to turn around to run away from the grounds. She didn't know when, but her legs took her over to him and grabbed his arm, to which he jerked instinctively and was about to punch her square in the jaw. When he saw who it was though he stopped, and looked horrified at his own hand. I am a demon. I hurt him bad, and I was about to hurt you. I need to go, Hinata," he whispered, trying to pull his arm free. Hinata shook her head desperately. "No, he tried to hurt you after the match was over. It wasn't your fault, and you were just scared. You didn't actually hurt me. It's okay, and Naruto-kun, don't listen to them." Naruto looked unsure of himself, before he shook his head. "But I was about to hurt you. That makes me a bad person because you're a good person and only bad people hit good people." Hinata huffed angrily, getting annoyed with the blonde's thick-headedness. "You didn't hurt me, Naruto-kun, I'm fine, see? Now come back. I'll go with you," she stuttered, blushing heavily as she took his hand. Naruto looked uncomfortable with the thought of going back, but agreed nonetheless, walking back to where Iruka was checking on Sasuke, who appeared to have been knocked unconscious. Who was his partner? Naruto? Where is Naruto? He yelled, catching sight of the boy. Naruto shrank back behind Hinata, where she adopted a glare and looked straight at Iruka, which surprised him since she was usually so shy. He tried attacking Naruto-kun from the back after the match was over. "Iruka-sensei," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Naruto-kun defended himself so he did nothing wrong. Iruka turned his angry look to Naruto, who shrank further behind Hinata. "Is this true, Naruto?" "Why yes," he said quietly, looking towards the ground. Iruka walked over and clapped him on the shoulder, startling him to look up into his instructor's now kind face. "Then you're not in trouble. In fact, Sasuke is for attacking you unprovoked. It's actually a serious offense that we don't tolerate in Konoha, especially in the academy. You did the right thing in protecting yourself, but I do think that you went a little overboard," he said with a chastising tone at the end. Naruto nodded, looking a little sheepish. "I'm sorry, Iruka-sensei, but it was all reaction. I didn't really know what I was doing until it was done." Iruka nodded, knowing that the boy was receiving special training from the Sannin. "Damn, I wonder how strong he is," Iruka thought, before looking back towards Sasuke. "Alright, time to get this little troublemaker to the hospital before I let him know how much detention he's gonna have to serve with me." At the end of the day, before Naruto split away from Hinata to head home, he looked at her with a large smile. "Thanks, Hinata-chan, for sticking up for me today. It made me feel a lot better, ya know?" he said happily. Hinata blushed, poking her index fingers together. "Oh, of course, Naruto-kun. I'll always be there if you need me," she said, turning an even deeper shade of red. Naruto smiled the largest he'd ever seen at that before wrapping her in a large hug, which caused the young girl's mind to overload in happiness. "Thanks, Hinata-chan, I'll see you tomorrow. I need to get to training tonight or Gigi will have my head." Naruto cringed, before running off. Hinata waved, a smile forming on her lips. She had said it. She said she could be there for him. People were always coming to save her, but now she had someone to save if he needed it. She went home and trained the hardest she had in a long time, to her father's surprise. Present time. Since then she'd actually showed up to a few of his training sessions, and got a much better idea of what his true power was. Anyone who could summon over 400 shadow clones and use them simply to train was bound to be extremely strong, plus with his jutsu list, which was expansive, and ability for clones to combine them without being told to was extremely strong. She had seen the real one sitting by Jiraiya concentrating on something, but it usually didn't last more than 20 minutes before Naruto shook his head at the hermit, to which he would sigh and give him something else to do. She was brought back from her memories as Naruto snapped his fingers in front of her face. Nay, Hinata-chan, we need to get going back soon, or Iruka-sensei will be angry with us again. Hinata frowned at him. He was angry with you, Naruto-kun. You're the one who was late, you just dragged me with you. Naruto faked a pout, which tore at the little girl's heart. I dragged you? So you didn't want to go? He said, giving her a sad look. He always did this whenever things didn't go his way, but this time she would resist. She wouldn't look at cute whisker marks. She wouldn't. I did want to go. Okay, fine. But let's go anyway, come on. She said, conceding defeat. She couldn't help it, whenever she looked at his little whisker marks on his face it reminded her of a cat or a fox, and she wanted to pet him, as weird as it sounded. She had yet to ask if she could, for fear that he would finally think she was weird like everyone else did. But she had won a few occasions when he had fallen asleep. His hair was soft, like the fleece of an animal. Naruto smiled largely, knowing he had won. All right, he exclaimed, smiling. The rest of the day would be boring, but at least he would spend it with his friend. Several months later, Naruto sighed as he pelted a target 100 feet away dead center with kunai. He had learned this stuff ages ago. He could probably do his same with the sickles that farmers used, and those were weighted badly and wobbled in midair. He had to put up with the Academy's methods though, because it was their official document that made him a shinobi. He watched as several other students failed to hit the target at all at 50 feet, which made him cringe a little. How can they be so bad? It isn't hard at all. Naruto turned around to see his classmate Shino looking at his distant target with a blank expression. Yay? Can you show me how you keep your kunai so stable during the flight time to the target? Mine keep going off balance and I can't find a solution to the problem. He asked in the same tone of voice, his sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. Naruto blinked. Someone was asking him for help? Sure, I just weighted a little backwards in my hand so that when I throw it the weight catches up. I don't know how to put it. Shino nodded, shifting his kunai in his hand a little. It feels odd, but it makes sense. The offset weight would compensate for the momentum that the kunai would have during the release, therefore making a more stable throw and flight. Thank you, Naruto, I'll let you know how it works out. Shino said, before walking back to his target and practicing again. Naruto blinked, before smiling. He had talked to someone else today. He couldn't wait to tell Jiraiya and Hinata. He renewed his speed of pelting kunai into his target before his enthusiasm got the best of him and he was throwing everything in his pouch. Shuriken, kunai, a few senbon, and even a smoke pellet or two, before he ran out. He blinked as Iruka came up behind him and smacked him on the head. Naruto, didn't I say it was kunai only practice today? We don't know how to throw the other weapons yet and I don't want you to learn the wrong. What the hell? He trailed off, looking towards the target as the smoke cleared. There were senbon in all of the vital points marked on the target, and the kunai and shuriken had actually cut the bullseye out of the target, leaving a neat round hole where it should be. He looked back down at Naruto, a bewildered expression on his face. The blonde scratched his head nervously. Hee. Sorry, I guess I got carried away, he said, smiling largely. I'll go get my weapons now. Iruka watched the boy run off towards the target, with a still shocked expression on his face. That boy is something else. I can't imagine what he's going to grow up to be. Later that day, Naruto and Hinata ate cheerily at Ichiraku, Naruto digging into his fifth bowl while Hinata finished up her first. While it wasn't as good as cinnamon buns, of which she had kept her love of a secret from Naruto so far, ramen wasn't bad at all, and she enjoyed the time spent with Naruto while eating it. Naruto finished slurping the last of his noodles up before patting his stomach in satisfaction. That was good. Nay, Hinata-chan, I talked to someone today. And they didn't hate me, and I think I helped them, he said excitedly, to which Hinata cocked her head to the side in curiosity. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Who was it? She asked it, secretly hoping it wasn't someone who would take her friend away from her. I think his name was Shanu, Shin, Shoni? I can't remember, Naruto said, his eyebrows knitting together in frustration. Hinata giggled, she always loved when he made that expression, it was funny to see him pout. Do you mean Shino, Naruto-kun? She asked. He was the Aburame clan's heir, and to hear of him talking to someone was a little odd. He was a quiet kid, keeping to himself and his beetles. She knew that he was the keeper of them, but most kids in class thought he was just a weird kid who liked bugs, and always got mad whenever someone was about to squish one. Naruto's face lit up. Yeah, Shino. He asked how I was throwing my kunai so straight, so I told him, and I hope he got better at it. But he didn't yell or hit me or anything, he exclaimed, spinning around in his seat. Hinata nodded, a little frown adorning her face. She never understood why the adults liked to call Naruto names or try to hurt him, but she didn't like it. She had asked her father and he had given her a hard look. It told her that she wasn't allowed to know yet, and that maybe in time. But he had made one thing very clear, she wasn't allowed to associate with him. A few months back, she would have listened without question, but now that she had found a real friend in Naruto, she took the risk of being caught each time to hang out with the hyperactive blonde. Naruto jumped off his stool, leaving some money on the counter for the ramen as he walked back towards the crossroads that would lead back to his house and Hinata's. Hinata got off hers and followed suit, sneezing as she did so. Naruto laughed and poked her forehead. Haha, someone's talking about you, Hinata-chan, he said in a teasing voice, causing her to blush. Maybe they're saying bad things about me, she trailed off, looking down. Naruto growled a little, punching his hand. If that's the case, I'll beat him up. Just you watch, Hinata-chan, he said, looking determined. Hinata smiled. As long as Naruto was there, she wouldn't have to worry anymore. Hinata-sama, Hinata-sama, a voice rang out from behind them, and Hinata whipped around to see one of the branch members running towards her, while throwing a nasty glare towards Naruto. Kubo-san, Hinata said, looking down. What is it? I was just on my way home. I understand that, Hinata-sama, but it was getting late and your father was getting worried. Was this little brat bothering you, Hinata-sama? I will take care of it. No, Hinata cried out, grabbing the man's arm. He was walking me towards the road leading to the C compound. He wasn't bothering me. Kubo didn't seem to hear, however, and shook her arm off with little effort. Please just wait 1 second, Hinata-sama. I'll make sure this demon stays away from you from now on. Hinata felt tears start to leak from her eyes and she looked over at Naruto, hoping that he was already running away. He was standing in the same place that she left him, looking into the branch member's eyes with cold determination. I wasn't doing anything wrong, Naruto said, his previous happy demeanor completely gone. If you attack me, I won't hold back, nor will Jiraiya-Jiji be happy. Kubo smirked. Stupid kid. You don't think I don't remember what Jiraiya did to those civils a while back? I'm not stupid enough to leave evidence. I am a chunin after all. Hinata-sama isn't like the other main house snobs that think us under their feet, and I won't go have you poisoning the mind of the future heiress when it could be our one chance of freedom. So I'll make sure you don't talk again, permanently. Hinata was horrified to hear the words spill from the normally gentle man's mouth. Kubo was always so nice, so gentle and caring towards her. But now he was going to kill Naruto. She wasn't going to see Naruto ever again. Kubo dashed towards Naruto, taking out a few kunai and throwing them towards the boy. Since the kunai they used at the academy were kept there, Naruto was weaponless, so all he could do was dodge. He did keep smoke pellets though, for pranks, so as soon as Kubo was within fighting distance he dropped it, blanketing the area in thick smoke. Do you not know the power of the Hyuga clan demon? This smoke means nothing to me. Byakugan, Kubo cried out, his eyes bulging in the signature fashion of his clan's dojutsu. He spotted a small figure running towards him in the smoke, obviously trying to sucker punch him. Hey, this kid is only still in the academy. I almost forgot, he knows absolutely nothing about battle. He weaved underneath the sloppy punch and quickly sealed 12 chakra points on the young boy's body, paralyzing him. He dropped to the ground quickly, and the smoke cleared soon after. Hinata watched in horror as Kubo crouched down next to Naruto and put his pointer finger to his temple, staring into the boy's eyes. "Goodbye, demon. May your soul rot in hell for all of eternity," he said. "You're the one who'll rot in hell." Naruto ground out, trying to lift his head. Kubo grunted before sending a chakra pulse through his brain, killing him instantly. Hinata's mind stopped working as she saw the body slump. He was gone. Then it poofed into smoke. "Wah!" Kubo started, before a strong kick into his back launched him forwards. Suddenly a fist emerged from the ground and knocked him up into the air, upon which several more Narutos jumped up from nearby rooftops, kicking the body higher and higher into the air. Several more Narutos were set up just below the Hyuga's airborne body, and were performing hand signs extremely fast. "Fuuton. Daitopa." They all cried out in unison, launching a gale force wind which launched the man at high speeds towards the training ground where he lived. The real Naruto snuck out from behind a tree and, snickering silently, poked Hinata in the ribs. "Eep!" she screamed, before turning around and smacking him in the face, which sent him sprawling. "Ow, ow, ow, ow," he muttered, holding his now red cheek. "Hinata-chan, that hurt." Hinata blinked, staring at the boy before her that she was almost certain she had watched die. "Naruto-kun?" she whispered. "Huh? Oh, I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. I didn't mean to beat up your family member guy. If you're mad at me, I oof," he exclaimed as she launched herself into his arms, hugging him tightly as she cried into his chest. "Naruto. I thought Yudd died," she cried, holding him tightly. Naruto remembered how upset he was when he thought Jiraiya was going to hurt him the first time he met him, and held her tight just like he had. "It's okay. I fooled that guy good though. As soon as I dropped that smoke bomb, I Kawarami'd with a clone that was hidden in the trees and then made more to set up for that combo attack. He didn't even know what hit him," Naruto said proudly, before his head suddenly perked up in the direction of his home. "Ah, he arrived. Nagato ni isn't happy," he shuddered, picking Hinata up and hanging into Kobu. "Let's go, I'll take you back home, Hinata-chan." Hinata nodded, closing her eyes as the rapid change of emotions had made her feel exhausted. She relaxed and fell asleep in the hanged boy's arms as several thoughts raced through her mind. "I need to get stronger. I need to protect Naruto. Naruto. I thought Yudd died," she cried, holding him tightly. Naruto remembered how upset he was when he thought Jiraiya was going to hurt him the first time he met him, and held her tight just like he had. "It's okay. I fooled that guy good though. As soon as I dropped that smoke bomb, I Kawarami'd with a clone that was hidden in the trees and then made more to set up for that combo attack. He didn't even know what hit him," Naruto said proudly, before his head suddenly perked up in the direction of his home. "Ah, he arrived. Nagato ni isn't happy," he shuddered, picking Hinata up and hanging into Kobu. "Let's go, I'll take you back home, Hinata-chan." Hinata nodded, closing her eyes as the rapid change of emotions had made her feel exhausted. She relaxed and fell asleep in the hanged boy's arms as several thoughts raced through her mind. "I need to get stronger. I need to protect Naruto." Naruto watched quietly as Jiraiya paced back and forth, glaring daggers at the tied-up man sitting in the middle of their training area. The man stared back blankly, conveying no emotion in his pupil-less eyes. Jiraiya growled, stomping one of his wooden sandals in the dirt. "Explain to me, again, why I shouldn't just kill you right now. For attempting to murder a child, please, explain to me this," he said angrily, fingering his kunai pouch for good measure. The man said nothing, only continued to watch the Sannin fight with himself on the punishment he would receive. He had been launched by that kid's wind jutsu several hundred feet, where a tower of said kid had been waiting to catch him. They had tied him up quickly and brought him before the Toad Sage, who was none too happy about the story the Naruto had to tell. Since then he had sat awaiting his verdict, since it seemed that the Sannin wanted to take matters into his own hands, like he did with the villagers some time ago. "Gigi," Naruto said, causing the old man's head to turn towards him. "I don't think you should kill him." Kubo could hardly hear what he had just heard. The demon giving up a chance to end someone's life? He must be trying to deceive him in some way. He killed whatever emotion was trying to build up, disbelief, confusion, anything that would sway his view to the demon's side. He wouldn't have any of it. "What? He just tried to kill you, Naruto. And if you hadn't thought as fast as you did, you'd probably be dead right now. The Hyuga are dangerous. I've told you that many times before, and your best chance of winning would be to have one underestimate you, which is what appears happened. Naruto nodded and looked towards the Hyuga, who stared back with a little bit of deep-seated hatred in his eyes. Naruto looked a bit sad at this, which almost pulled the feeling of confusion to the surface again for Kubo, who squashed it down quickly. I know. But, he started, smiling brightly at Jiraiya. He was just trying to protect Hinata-chan, even if he did it for reasons that were wrong. And that means he's a good person. Kubo and Jiraiya stared the boy open-mouthed. Because I was protecting her? Why the fuck would he care about that? All he was going to do was plant his demon seed in her after he poisoned her mind anyway. That's what Hyuga-sama briefed us on when that monstrosity was spotted near her. Why would he want me to live because I came between him and his goal? This makes no sense. Naruto, Jiraiya said, rubbing his face in exasperation. Just because he did it for a noble cause doesn't make what he did right. So it isn't right that our shinobi kill criminals, even if it seems right to us? Naruto interrupted, an intelligent gleam in his eyes. I hold the Kyuubi inside me, just like you told me Gigi, and even though I'm just its jailer, many people still think that I'm it. They truly believe it, which is why I've never had any friends. He trailed off, looking lonely. That's why I don't want to hurt them back. They just want to protect their precious people. Like I want to protect you, or Nagato-ni, or Hinata-chan. That guy just wanted to protect her from me, since I'm the demon to him, so I don't want him to die. Jiraiya sat down on a stone and looked at Kubo long and hard, and he stared back with a growing anxiety. Why would the demon talk with such compassion? Why would a demon care about people? Why would the Hokage and one of the Sannin care about a demon? What if the boy wasn't a demon? That struck Kubo with the force of a ton of bricks and his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He had been trying to murder a child, even if he had thought the child the Kyuubi no Kitsune, it was a child nonetheless, not even through the academy. He had attempted to destroy a child's mind with a Jukin strike, to put an end to not even 7 years of life. Jiraiya watched the expressions play across the man's face with a careful eye, and immediately noticed when it started showing remorse. It was one of the first he'd seen, and his anger quickly started to evaporate. He looked over to see Naruto giving him a pleading look, and he sighed, nodding. Naruto walked over to the man who looked up at the child with a great sadness. Naruto. Naruto took out a kunai and cut the man's ropes, but he didn't move from his spot. I've always thought. Everyone said, I didn't. Naruto turned and walked away, a few tears rolling down his face. I don't want you dead, but I hate you. Please don't let them take Hinata-chan away from me, he said, before he quickly disappeared into the woods on the edge of the clearing. Kubo stared blankly after him, his mind fighting with itself on the information he had just deduced. Jiraiya stood up and walked over to the man, pulling him up by the scruff of his shirt. Now you listen here, he growled. Hinata is the only friend that boy has, and he cherishes her above even me at times. If it wasn't for him, you'd be digesting in a frog's stomach by now, I promise you that. Kubo gulped, sweat starting to bead from his forehead as he realized how close he was to taking the full force of the Sannin's wrath. You had better do everything in your power to make sure that Hiashi doesn't interfere with their friendship, because if I find out that you let something slip by because you doubted that child again, I will make sure that every moment from then on will be filled with pain you can only imagine, he said, throwing the Hyuga into a tree. Kubo got up slowly, nodding. I understand, Jiraiya-sama, I am truly sorry, but, he started, looking up towards the man, confusion evident in his eyes. That boy. Why? Is he not the demon? I thought for sure. Jiraiya took on a look of sympathy and frustration. I told them they shouldn't stop teaching Fuinjutsu in the academy. Look, if I were to seal a kunai into a scroll, does that make the scroll a kunai? Kubo shook his head, and a small look of enlightenment fell on him. Jiraiya nodded. You understand. Why should it be different for that boy? The Kyuubi's chakra is sealed inside him, yet, but he's simply acting as its container. Just because it's inside him, doesn't mean he is it. Trust me, we'd all have been gone for a long time now if it was any different. 1 week later, Naruto walked home, feeling on cloud 9. He had just finished pushing Hinata on the swing at the park, and it was one of the few times she was laughing freely, which always put him in a good mood. She had such a pretty laugh, he wished she would do it more. He turned a corner and froze. There were multiple people standing there with masks on, and they definitely weren't Anbu. He stood completely still as they did the same, his mind racing with possible escape routes. Clones. Split. Substitute. Ground. Building. No, too many. More. Oh man. He groaned inwardly as he felt several more presences appear behind him. This was coordinated, this was planned. Suddenly a body was tossed at him, a tortuous look on the corpse's face and no eyes. They were completely gone, but the face. Naruto went white. Kubo, I'm glad to see you recognize this traitor. The man in the front of the formation said. It seems you managed to poison his mind, for he was going to go and warn you about our little plan. Unfortunately for him, he was in the branch family, and it's very simple to activate their seals to force them to submit. It seems I put a little too much chakra into the seal though. No matter, he is replaceable. Naruto looked up, a look of fury on his face. You killed him because he wanted to help me? Why didn't you just lock him up or something? He didn't deserve to die. He screamed before launching himself full speed towards the man. Suddenly he felt the wind knocked from his body as a fist lodged itself deep in his gut, launching him back several feet and onto the ground where he doubled in on himself, clutching his stomach and trying to breathe. Ignorant demon, if you had corrupted his mind so much that you didn't want him to die, he was obviously a loyal servant, and therefore a danger to everyone in the clan and compound. The man said, kicking Naruto in his head, causing him to wheeze in pain. You will not live to see this night, you can join your companion in the afterlife. Jiraiya pumped even more chakra into his legs, pushing himself as fast as he could possibly go. He had felt the spike in Naruto's chakra that they had practiced, if he ever got into danger, but he hadn't expected to run into several well-placed traps on the perimeter of their home. It had taken a few precious minutes of time for him to weave through them, as they appeared to have been laid by high Junin-level shinobi, before he was able to start making his way towards the spike. Where are you, Gaki? Please be okay. He thought frantically, as he flew through some hand signs and summoned a few toads. Find Naruto, he shouted, and they all scattered immediately. He hoped he wasn't too late. A few tense minutes later one of his summons shot a ball of air towards the sky, signaling that he had found him. Jiraiya immediately shunshined over to the place he saw it, and found the toad looking down. Hiruta, what's the mat, and no. Jiraiya trailed off, as he looked at the wall of the alley they were in. This was, gee, get me, med. Jiraiya choked out, a few tears spilling from his eyes. Naruto was hardly breathing. You can't die, kid. He heard little footsteps dashing against the pavement behind him, and he turned around, whipping a kunai out to quickly end whoever came to further harm his godson, when he saw little Hinata staring at Naruto's body pinned to the wall. Her eyes widened and she slumped against the wall, reaching a hand towards him. Ru-tu? Hinata-sama, you don't want to see WH. A man came wheeling around the corner, trying to grab the girl but coming face to face with a bloodthirsty Jiraiya. A quick chop to the neck put the man asleep, and he quickly grabbed Hinata, pulling her out of the alley so as to not force her to endure the sight anymore. She was so young still. He looked down and saw her eyes still wide open, but she was slumped over. She was muttering to herself over and over, tears spilling from her eyes in a river. Nothing he did could bring her out of her trance, so he made a shadow clone and handed her to it. It nodded and leapt off towards the Hyuga compound. Jiraiya looked back towards the blonde and felt his resolve strengthen. They couldn't stay here. Hinata woke up, rubbing her eyes, feeling groggy as she tried to remember what had happened last night. She shook as she remembered the nightmare she had. Naruto had been killed and she hadn't been able to protect him. She quickly jumped out of bed and started to get ready, eager to see him and shake the bad thoughts out of her head. As one of the branch members dropped her off in front of the academy, she noticed Naruto wasn't waiting to greet her. She was a little sad but figured there was a good reason, and shyly made her way to their classroom. She looked up at their seats, but he wasn't there either. Anxiety started gnawing at her stomach as she worriedly sat down alone, the first time since Naruto had come up and talked to her. She began poking her index fingers together, thinking of all the trouble Naruto had gotten into, what he could possibly be doing this time. She thought of her nightmare last night. She shook her head, biting back a few tears. That would never happen. The rest of the kids came in the door and Iruka soon followed. Still no Naruto. She quickly hopped down the stairs and went up to her sensei as he got his papers together at his desk. Oh, yes Hinata? Iruka said kindly, turning to face her. Where's Naruto K-kun? Hinata asked, a sad look on her face. Iruka's face quickly went blank, and she became a little bit more frightened. I'll tell the class. Please go sit down Hinata. He said kindly, although he sounded a little more subdued. She nodded and slowly ascended the stairs, her stomach steadily feeling worse and worse. Iruka got up on the podium and looked sadly out to the class. Students, last night, Naruto was attacked. Hinata felt the color drain from her face. It was a nightmare, a nightmare, a nightmare. Won't be joining us in class for some time. Naruto can't be hurt. I said I would protect him. I need to protect him. Gone for the next several years. Hinata's head snapped up. What did you say, sensei? Iruka looked at the young Hyuga with sympathy. I said that Jiraiya-sama is taking Naruto away from the village to train him personally for the next few years. Hinata immediately bolted from her seat, ignoring the cries of protest from Iruka. She quickly wound through the halls and burst from the front door, making a beeline for the path that led to Naruto's home. She ran as fast as her little legs could carry her all the way to the front door, before she frantically knocked on it, looking behind her to see if anyone was following. The door opened to reveal an orange-haired man with many piercings, Nagato ni. She had met him on multiple occasions when coming to watch Naruto train, and found that the stoic man was actually quite nice. Nagato ni-san. Where? If you're here looking for Naruto, then he is already gone. Hinata's heart dropped, and she felt the tears well back up and break free from her eyes. Years. She wouldn't see him for years, and she hadn't even known him for a full one. Nagato watched with a hint of sadness as the young girl sat on the ground and started crying. She was truly close to him, and Jiraiya was opposed to breaking them apart, but Naruto's safety was of a greater priority to him, so it had to be done. Nagato reached into his cloak and took out a letter, allowing it to float gently towards the girl who looked it while sniffling. What's this? She muttered, wiping the tears from her eyes. A letter from Jiraiya-sensei. Naruto would have written in it as well, but he had not yet regained consciousness. He said, turning around and activating several seals on the door. You would do well to leave this area now. The seals will activate on these grounds in approximately 1 hour, rendering anyone who comes here a painful greeting. We will communicate with you as best we can while gone, but you will not see Naruto until you graduate. I am sorry it has come to this, but know that all three of us will miss you greatly while gone. Nagato's tone became a bit friendlier at the end, conveying his sadness at having to leave. Hinata sniffed, rubbing her eyes. Why though? I'll miss him a lot. No one else wants to be my friend. Nagato stood her to her feet and looked up at the clouds floating by. What do you fight for, young heiress? Hinata sniffed again, looking confused. Huh? The pierced man looked at her with a serious expression. What drives you to become a good shinobi, to stand out among the rest? Hinata looked down. I want to make my father proud, and my clan, and, she blushed. I want to protect Naruto-kun. Nagato nodded. All noble reasons. However, you need to become much stronger if you wish to protect Naruto. His enemies will be very powerful, I can promise you that. Hinata wrapped her arms around herself, looking down. Why? I cannot tell you. But know this, I am not telling you these things for no reason. Use your sadness, your bitterness that we are gone, and use it to focus. Train yourself hard for the time we are gone, so that when we come back, you may look upon Naruto as your equal, and stand by his side once again while being able to protect him as you wish to do. Hinata nodded blankly, not entirely understanding what he meant, but getting the gist of it. She started walking back towards the path, clutching the letter close. She stayed that way all the way to a small clearing that she and Naruto would play in sometimes. She curled up on the ground and cried. Nagato had already left, so she was alone. Just like she had been before Naruto, and like she would be from now on. Alone. She looked at the letter and opened it, pulling out 2 things from the container. The first was a photo of her and Naruto, both of them smiling widely at the camera while holding up the turtles they had caught at the pond. She knew immediately that this photo was now the most precious thing in the world to her, and she had to protect it no matter what. The second was a letter, the one from Jiraiya based on what Nagato told her. She ignored it for now, choosing instead to stare at the photo until she would go back home later to read it before going to bed for the night. Hinata, I'm sorry that we had to leave like this, but Naruto's safety is my #1 priority right now. He needs to get stronger before he can come back, so we need to keep him safe until then. I'm getting ahead of myself though, I need to let you know something about last night. That was no dream you had. That is what the people of the village think Naruto deserves, and that is why we have to leave. Why they hate him so much will be up for him to tell you when we come back, which will be when you graduate the academy. He already knows, but I ask that you don't push him to tell you. It's a sensitive topic, please trust me on this. I know you'll be extremely sad to hear this, but don't worry. Naruto will be back in time to get a team, and I'll try and argue with the Hokage to put the two of you on a team. I know you have a strong bond and that can prove invaluable on the battlefield, when all you have is each other. Until then, train hard so that you can prove to old man Hokage that you deserve to be on a team with him, and I promise you the years will fly by quickly. I know you're a little young to understand this, so save this letter, and reread it every once in a while so that you can grasp fully what this all means. Naruto will be safe with me, so don't worry about him. I'll try to send letter to you every once in a while, and I'm sure Naruto will want to as well. Don't worry, we'll be back before you know it. Jiraiya. Hinata, I'm sorry that we had to leave like this, but Naruto's safety is my #1 priority right now. He needs to get stronger before he can come back, so we need to keep him safe until then. I'm getting ahead of myself though, I need to let you know something about last night. That was no dream you had. That is what the people of the village think Naruto deserves, and that is why we have to leave. Why they hate him so much will be up for him to tell you when we come back, which will be when you graduate the academy. He already knows, but I ask that you don't push him to tell you. It's a sensitive topic, please trust me on this. I know you'll be extremely sad to hear this, but don't worry. Naruto will be back in time to get a team, and I'll try and argue with the Hokage to put the two of you on a team. I know you have a strong bond and that can prove invaluable on the battlefield, when all you have is each other. Until then, train hard so that you can prove to old man Hokage that you deserve to be on a team with him, and I promise you the years will fly by quickly. I know you're a little young to understand this, so save this letter, and reread it every once in a while so that you can grasp fully what this all means. Naruto will be safe with me, so don't worry about him. I'll try to send letter to you every once in a while, and I'm sure Naruto will want to as well. Don't worry, we'll be back before you know it. Jiraiya. 5 years later, two figures stood at the very top of a tree, looking over the canopy to where the large, imposing gates of Konoha stood ever vigilant. To both of them, it was a welcome sight. To one, however, it was nerve-wracking, but he didn't let it show, keeping his face cool and impassive. Are you ready? Once we enter, there's no going back, the older man said menacingly, crossing his arms to look at his partner. I have no choice but to be ready. I've been gone for too long, and I feel my luck has ran out. I need to be there to protect them in case something happens. That being said, we're wasting time, our enemies could be on the move as we speak. Let's go, he said, leaping down from the tree, and his partner followed silently. Hinata sighed and looked up at the clouds, stretching out on the ground below her. She had graduated, of course, but now there was nothing to do as the rest of the students took their respective tests, so those were done were dismissed until 3 p.m. And it was only noon. She had been done for over an hour now and she had nothing to do. Except maybe train. She shook her head. No use in tiring herself out when she would be meeting her Junin sensei today. She wanted to appear highly presentable, to look strong and capable, so that she could become an official genin and prove that she was strong, to both herself and her father. And Naruto. She sighed again. It had been over a year since she'd last received a message from Jiraiya. They had come frequently in the years following Naruto's departure, but as the training got more intense and the areas they visited more dangerous, he said that it wasn't always possible they would be able to send out a letter. And true to his word, they had dwindled to once every few months before they had cut out completely. It had been over a year since she had last heard from the blonde, the last letter he had sent saying that he missed her. With all of his heart, every day. She had that particular letter sealed into a lockbox along with the picture of the two of them shared before he had left. She blushed slightly, thinking of what he must look like now. Probably still short, still a little baby fat on him. They were only 12 after all, lean muscle. Under a waterfall. She pictured what he would look like with his shirt off. Her daydream continued as she stared at the clouds, a bit of blood dripping from her nose, not that she had noticed. A dark chuckle from in the woods instantly put her on her guard, and she flipped upward, immediately settling into the Jukin stance. She activated her Byakugan without a word, searching frantically through the trees for the source of the noise, although she found none. She let go of the breath she had been holding, before noticing the blood on her cheek. She blushed pink and rubbed it away, glad that no one was around to see her evidence of thinking such perverted thoughts. She was the good girl of the Hyuga, the princess of the clan. She was strong, almost even in skill with Neji, which her father took great pride in her for. It was all thanks to Naruto. His encouragement before he left, Jiraiya's and Nagato's words to her, all repeated in her head each and every day, driving her to push herself beyond her limits and train harder than she ever would have otherwise. Where before she was about to drop behind Hanabi in terms of skill, she now never failed to put her sister on her butt, despite doing it as gently as possible so as to not harm the young girl. Where before Neji could effortlessly toy with her and show off to anyone watching on the sidelines, he now had to focus and not rush into fights with her recklessly, lest she exploit those weaknesses and win their spars. She had also, based on encouraging words Jiraiya put on the paper of her stealth skills from Style watching Naruto. She had hoped the blonde hadn't seen, she had begun to work on those as well. She had discovered the skill she had developed to protect her crush from afar had other practical uses. Soon after her self-training, she had managed to sneak up and catch a fat cat she found out the name of to be Tora, and gave it to the genin team who had approached her full of gratitude that they no longer had to deal with the stupid beast. She progressed from there, following various troublemakers, drunkards, and shady businesspeople as a service to Konoha, informing local Anbu or Junin of situations before they even began, which put her on the good side of many of the shinobi in the village. An academy student serving her village before she was even an official shinobi? Someone that was hardly heard of in their dog-eat-dog world. Selflessness was a prized quality, and one, sadly, that was exploited far too often. Hinata would see those situations though, using her Byakugan to weave through the liars and those who genuinely needed help. And she grew stronger because of it. Overall, she was progressing quickly. So quickly that it even scared her a little, and made her a little ashamed that she had no other hobbies besides training and tending to her flower garden, but that didn't take much time. It was train, read Naruto's letters, train, eat, train, sleep, train, attend clan meeting, train, train, train. She was a little relieved that she had trained as much as she did, if she wanted to be honest with herself. It helped the time pass quickly, and just like Jiraiya had said, the few years that she was forced to be apart from Naruto actually passed fairly quickly. Sure, she missed him every second of every day, and he would even show up in her dreams sometimes to wipe away the tears she wanted to shed because of the distance between them. But other than that, she was fine. And he would be back soon. Her eyes brightened up upon remembering this, and she decided to go get a treat. A nice, warm cinnamon bun from the bakery, something to celebrate her victory, and Naruto's soon-to-be return. After all, Jiraiya said that Naruto had to show up to take some sort of test for him to pass. Although it didn't have to necessarily be on the same day that everyone else took theirs. He was a special case, after all, and to be put into a team. They were receiving teams later today, so she wondered if he was supposed to be back today. She hoped so. She felt her stomach drop a little when she considered that he might not make the deadline, and have to wait another year. Which meant that he might not get placed on her team. Which means we'll still never see each other, even when he comes back. Hinata thought glumly, taking a bite into her cinnamon bun. As soon as the pastry met her taste buds, she practically moaned in ecstasy, looking around quickly to make sure no one noticed her. This was her one guilty pleasure. Well, besides fantasizing about a certain blonde, her hormones were raging. After all, it was only natural, she told herself, and she didn't want anyone to know. As she took a second bite and felt some of the melted icing begin to drip down her chin, she heard a slight hitching of breath from somewhere in front of her. She narrowed her eyes and whipped them back and forth, but still seeing no one. This was strange. She shook her head. She was getting paranoid, the feeling of meeting her new sensei that would determine the type of team she would be in, who she would be looking up to, and everything that involved at least the next year of her life must be affecting her. Speaking of which, she could swear she heard the instructors telling the kids their teams, but she hadn't been told anything about hers. She shrugged, popping the rest of the cinnamon bun in her mouth with one last shiver of happiness before she made her way through the shopping district, watching with idle fascination all the different people throw their money away for outrageous-looking clothes. I'll never get why anyone would pay that much just for one kimono, no matter how nice it looks. Hinata thought, watching the lady pay 40,000 yen for a silky-looking kimono. Sure, it looked beautiful, but she would rather spend her money on more practical things, like ninja tools, another jacket, some handcu. She smacked her head, feeling a slight blush rush to her cheeks. Bad Hinata. Being away from Naruto for so long and being stuck around Shino's friend Kiba had begun to put more and more perverted thoughts into her head. Stupid mutt, can't stop talking about mating. Hinata stuttered even in her head as a blonde flashed through her head along with that magical word. This time loud boisterous laughter rang out as she felt her cheeks flush a tomato red. Several people turned their heads in the direction of the source, but no one seemed to be making the noise. It was simply gone. Hinata shivered, her thoughts instantly turning dark. This is no coincidence. Someone is following me, she thought, her eyes silently activating as she scanned for hidden chakra signatures. She huffed, obviously frustrated. None. What was going on? She quickly dashed onto the nearest rooftop, before she began roof-hopping back to the academy. She may be a few hours early, but it was better than feeling as if the eyes of a predator were watching her every move. A pair of eyes were indeed watched the violet-haired girl dash off, amusement evident in them. The figure said nothing, but quickly dropped from his hiding spot and dashed off after her, making sure he was out of her field of vision. Getting caught was definitely not on his list of things to do today, but seeing her was. He'd watch for only a little longer, he told himself, then make himself known. Hinata sighed dejectedly as she walked through one of the more heavily wooded training areas. She had gone back to the academy, hoping that her Junin sensei had shown up, but no luck so far. She had even asked about her team, but simply told to come back later and she'd find out. Great. She idly kicked a rock. This was bullshit. She wanted to get started. She wanted to prove herself worthy of the title, Konoha Shinobi, and make herself worthy of Naruto. She had realized at some point during his absence that she liked him as much more than just his best friend. Sure, she cherished that, but she felt she was entitled to a little selfishness, wanting more. She'd wait as long as she had to, of course, but hoped that he would feel the same after being away from her for so long. Wishful thinking, but she was hopeful nonetheless. A sudden breaking of a branch had her spinning in the same instant, as she watched a brown-cloaked figure rushing at her through the thick cover of trees. She raised her palm, gathering chakra to juken her attacker in the face, but the figure twisted at the last moment, dodging her extended arm, and spearing her in the stomach, knocking them both to the ground where they rolled for a good 15 feet. Hinata gasped as she tried to refill her lungs, struggling as best she could against her enemy who had her in a tight grip from behind. She had to disengage before they had a chance to stab her with a kunai, or break one of her limbs, putting her at a disadvantage. She raised her arm, about to swiftly elbow the person in the face when a choked sob reached her ears. Ta-chan. She heard, before realizing the person wasn't attacking, but simply holding her, arms wrapped around her waist from the back. I know that voice, she thought, and with trembling hands, she reached back and pulled back the hood, revealing spiky blonde hair. N. She sputtered out, still unable to see his face due to it being buried into her back. The boy said nothing, just squeezed her tighter, pressing a light kiss into her spine. She shivered. I missed you. So much, Hinata-chan. The blonde choked out, raising his head to look her in the eyes, causing her entire being to resonate with happiness. Naruto-kun. She whispered, before it was her turn to twist around to face his front, to bury her head in his chest, crying her eyes out and holding him tight as he whispered soothing things to her and stroked her hair. All the loneliness she'd been holding back, all the pain and emptiness she'd felt for the past 5 years, all came to the forefront as the boy she'd cherished for over half her life was finally back in her life, and within arm's reach. They stayed that way for a long while, Hinata getting the rest of her tears out while he stroked her hair, holding her tight to his chest, before she sniffed, leaning back to look at his face. It was just like she'd imagined, plus a few things. Much of the baby fat was gone, replaced by the lean face of a fighter, although a little bit still remained, destined to disappear only with age. His hair had grown long and unruly, looking like he hadn't had a haircut since she'd last seen him, but it still had the same soft, fleecy look, and she was dying to run her hands through it to see how it felt. His eyes though, this was something she wasn't expecting. The once kind, soft open eyes he had were the same, but only to a point. She could detect a certain hardness in them, a look that said he knew of the cruelties the world could throw at you without batting an eyelid, and expect you to deal with them just the same. Those eyes were the same, yet so different. She found herself staring, a light blush adorning her cheeks like the blonde stared back. He was having similar thoughts, studying her now that he could finally get a good look at her. Where before her cheeks were round, they now had a shapely curve to them, her entire face seeming more graceful and beautiful, he supposed. He blushed as he felt her body press against his, realizing what else time and puberty seemed to have done for the young Hyuga. He felt her growing chest push against his own, and her womanly hips slide against his form. He inhaled her scent in, feeling intoxicated. God, he missed her, and now he was back, and she was all his again. Naruto-kun, Hinata said, looking up at him. He tilted his head, giving indication that he was listening. Where did that scar on your chest come from? He looked down, cursing when he realized that his cloak had come open at some point, revealing his muscled chest, but also a thick scar that ranged from over his heart in a jagged line down to his hip. He frowned, a dark memory coming to mind, before he shuddered, drawing in a jagged breath as he felt her finger trace the damaged skin. It must have hurt, she muttered, frowning, not knowing the pleasing effect her touching was causing the young boy. He felt his own blush start to form, as he watched her eyes rake his body for any more injuries he may have sustained. Don't worry, Hina-chan," he said, causing her to raise an embarrassed eyebrow and blush at the new pet name. There aren't any more. Just that one." She nodded, seeming to realize the position she was in before removing her hand from his bare flesh and simply holding him again. "I missed you, Naruto-kun." He smiled, leaning his head against hers and squeezing her again. "I missed you too, Hinata-chan." Naruto was back in his regular outfit consisting of black, standard shinobi pants which he insisted had a secret, causing Hinata's mind to roam on what he could be hiding, and a black and orange jacket. She knew orange was his favorite color, so it didn't surprise her to find it somewhere on the boy's clothing. They had walked through the training ground, talking about things not of consequence, in case of unwelcome ears nearby. Hinata never did find who was following her, although she had asked Naruto and he had denied anything other than finding her and spearing her in the woods in excitement, until they had emerged onto the main street of Konoha, heading towards the academy. The change in Naruto's eyes and his stance as soon as they stepped foot into public shocked Hinata. Gone was the boy she had played with years ago, gone was the boy who had just held her close in the woods. Here was one that took no chances, trusted no one, and kept to himself. His eyes were cold, darting back and forth to look for possible threats, and upon one of the villagers recognizing him and glaring at him, he sent one right back that had the man pissing his pants. She was kind of scared. This wasn't the Naruto she knew. The warm, loving boy she had fallen for. This wasn't him. But the moment her frightened eyes met his, she saw a bit of the cold exterior melt away, turning his icy blue eyes into the deep, warm ocean blue she could stare into forever. Until his hand whipped behind him, catching a plate that had been aimed for his head. His cold gaze returned, and he slowly turned his head behind him, spotting the perpetrator. It was a civilian who was washing dishes on his front porch, and upon spotting the demon back in their peaceful village, had decided to try to drive him off. Sadly, this wasn't the same helpless boy the village had mauled in the past. This was one different. His face grew pale as the plate in the boy's hands suddenly shattered into many pieces. How had he done that? His hand didn't even move. He howled in agony as his arm suddenly shot out blood. He looked down to notice one of the shards of plate embedded in his tricep. Naruto walked off without another word, Hinata keeping close to his side. She looked at him sadly. This wasn't how he wanted to come back, but another warm glance from her crush had her feeling a little better. "I knew this would happen," he said with a slightly bitter voice. "I didn't exactly want to come back, but Gigi said I had to if I wanted to become an official shinobi, and I wanted to see you." he said, looking forward. She felt her face grow warm and she smiled. Even if he showed a colder side now, he was still the hyperactive caring boy she knew. She felt her blush deepen at the action she was about to take, and trying not to think about it, she reached down and grabbed his hand, holding it tightly. She felt his eyes turn to her in surprise, and she could have sworn she saw a slight blush of his own appear, before he turned his eyes back to the main path, a smile on his face. He weaved his fingers in between hers, and she gained a smile that matched his. The verbal abuse the villagers began to dish out to the newly returned demon, reflecting off their bubble of happiness. After entering the building, Naruto gave Hinata a sad smile, stating that he had to head off to classroom A4 to receive his assignment. This information was received by Hinata with a dazzling smile, and her excited voice stating that the classroom he was supposed to go to was the same as hers. That meant that there was a strong chance they were on the same team, seeing as how different teams were supposed to go to different classrooms to meet their respective Junin senseis. Naruto had also smiled widely at this, seeming thrilled with the idea of having the pale-eyed beauty as his teammate. They entered the room, fingers still interlocked, turning their attention to the only other figure in the room. Said figure turned his head over to them, revealing it to be Shino. Naruto's cold mask quickly reattached itself, but Hinata continued smiling brightly. Hi Shino-kun, Hinata said, letting go of Naruto's hand to go greet him, much to a certain blonde's disappointment. Are you here to receive your team assignment too? Shino nodded, glancing back and forth between the two. I am. It's good to see you again, Naruto-kun, he said, looking towards the blonde. The boy didn't respond, his calculating glare still resting on the Aburame. Hinata looked back and noticed this, smacking herself in the forehead lightly. Oh, Naruto-kun, I forgot to tell you, Shino-kun here is my friend. After you left, I remembered you said that he talked to you like normal instead of like the rest. I decided to ask for help one day when it came to setting traps, and we've been friends ever since. She finished, smiling brightly. Naruto felt a bit of jealousy creep into his mind as he looked at Shino. The boy stared back impassively, his sunglasses blocking whatever emotion Naruto might have been able to discern from his eyes. Naruto remembered the time Shino had asked him how he was able to throw a kunai straight, and that simple interaction had filled him with joy. He slowly lowered his guard, his cold exterior transforming into a friendly, albeit hesitant one. Shino, it's been a while, he said, smiling crookedly. Shino nodded, letting his coat fall a little to reveal his smile. I'm glad to see you again, Naruto-kun, the real you, I might add. May I ask what happened to force you to adopt a mask like that? Naruto chuckled bitterly, shaking his head, causing Hinata to frown lightly. Maybe some other time, but it's not something I like talking about. Shino nodded, before settling back into his chair. Well, either way, I'm glad you trust me enough to let me see you. I hope you've grown strong in your years away from the village, because most of the class has grown sick of Sasuke, and I'd be glad to see you kick his ass, pardon my language. He added as an afterthought. Naruto laughed, shaking his head with amusement. That Teme is still being a little prick and acting high and mighty? Didn't he learn his lesson when I handed him his own ass last time? Oh well, I'll see to it that he remembers he isn't the almighty Prince Uchiha the next time we get to fight. Naruto promised, earning him a chuckle from Shino. I'd appreciate that, he said, before turning to Hinata. So, it looks like we'll all be on the same team. I just wonder which Junin will be teaching us. Hinata shrugged, blushing slightly as Naruto crept up next to her, keeping himself in close proximity. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it yet, just that I needed to be in here by late afternoon if no one approached me. Shino looked at Naruto questioningly, and he received a similar shrug. I took my test earlier and was told the same thing. Hinata raised an eyebrow at Naruto, looking at him sideways. You never told me that you had taken your test. What was it? Naruto smiled largely. It's a secret. Let's just say that I got to see some interesting stuff. Hinata was confused at his words, but decided not to pry. He had passed, right? That was what was important. They all turned their heads as the door opened, relieved that their Junin sensei had finally decided to show up. Surprisingly, however, it was the Hokage that walked through the sliding door, regarding them all with kind expressions. Hokage Jiji, Naruto exclaimed, leaping into the man's arms and hugging him. The Hokage laughed in happiness, hugging the young shinobi back. "It's good to see you again, Naruto," he said kindly, ruffling the boy's hair. Naruto pouted, before bouncing excitedly. "Are you our sensei Gigi?" Naruto asked, an expectant expression on his face. Sarutobi shook his head, a chuckle escaping him. Naruto shrugged, slight disappointment coming to his eyes. "Oh well, I can dream, can't I?" The elderly leader cleared his throat, causing Naruto to close his mouth and focus on him. "No, and, on the same subject, the three of you will not have the same sensei seeing as how you're not on the same team," he said, causing Hinata's eyes to widen in surprise and disappointment. Naruto's narrowed in irritation. "Then why were we told to meet in the same room? Surely not just so you could bring together three people who would enjoy being together and crush their hopes?" Naruto asked sarcastically, drawing a look of disbelief from Hinata and Sarutobi. Shino merely filled away the comment for later. "No, Naruto, of course I wouldn't, there is most certainly a reason for this," he began. "The three of you will not be on any three-man cell, on account of your skills being requested in specialty divisions within our ranks." All three of the newly appointed genin felt their jaws drop as their leader continued. "Shino, due to your natural ability to both detect and quickly set up traps, as well as your skill with your Kakaichu, you are being requested to train under Ibiki Morino as a forward scout and torture expert within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept?" Shino nodded, using a single finger to fix his sunglasses. "I would be honored to, Hokage-sama." Sarutobi nodded, before turning to Naruto, who was now hovering just behind the young Hyuga, who was trying to keep the blood from rushing to her face when his breath tickled the back of her neck, and Hinata. "Naruto, due to your prowess in combat, tactical genuineness, and exceptional stealth abilities, you are being requested to continue to train under the Toad Sage Jiraiya, doing solo missions that I see fit to send you on, or going along as support with other three-man cells. In these instances, you are not required to listen to the Junin sensei of the team in times of combat, seeing as how you have much experience under your belt at this point, but in any other instances you are to recognize their rank and take orders as they see fit. Do you accept?" he finished, fixing Naruto with a critical stare. Naruto nodded. Sarutobi sighed a bit in relief. Naruto was still a bit of a wildcard, and he didn't know what he'd do if the boy didn't take the offer. Getting to go solo was the best choice for the boy, and getting the council to agree, via many threats and reminders of who they were dealing with, had been a pain in the ass. He turned to Hinata, watching her straighten up with a determined expression on her face. He smiled, seeing the will of fire burning strong in her eyes. "Hinata, due to your exceptional stealth skills, tracking skills, and specialty in taijutsu, you are being requested to train under Mitarashi Anko as a specialist assassin within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept?" He saw Hinata's eyes widen in happiness, before growing a little distraught, flickering over to Naruto's still form. Sarutobi chuckled lightly. "Hinata-chan, you have no need to worry. Naruto will have partial control over who he wishes to support, and you will not be sent on assassination missions for quite some time. In time this will be your job, but until then, Anko is merely there to guide your training to see where you need improvement on your current skills, before expanding to infiltration and other such subjects. You will be free to train with others in your free time, and aid other teams in missions, should they request you." He added the last part with emphasis, shooting a look towards Naruto who caught on immediately, causing his face to split into a wide grin. Hinata nodded, also sporting a large smile, blushing a little when she felt Naruto squeeze her hand from behind her. "I accept, Hokage-sama." Hiruzen smiled, raising his arms. "Then, I hereby welcome you as official genin of Konoha." He saw Hinata's eyes widen in happiness, before growing a little distraught, flickering over to Naruto's still form. Sarutobi chuckled lightly. "Hinata-chan, you have no need to worry. Naruto will have partial control over who he wishes to support, and you will not be sent on assassination missions for quite some time. In time this will be your job, but until then, Anko is merely there to guide your training to see where you need improvement on your current skills, before expanding to infiltration and other such subjects. You will be free to train with others in your free time, and aid other teams in missions, should they request you." He added the last part with emphasis, shooting a look towards Naruto who caught on immediately, causing his face to split into a wide grin. Hinata nodded, also sporting a large smile, blushing a little when she felt Naruto squeeze her hand from behind her. "I accept, Hokage-sama." Hiruzen smiled, raising his arms. "Then, I hereby welcome you as official genin of Konoha." Naruto grunted, taking the chakra-powered hit to his thigh before using his good leg to push himself away, letting loose a few shadow clones as cover. As he leapt away, Hinata swiftly took pursuit, rolling in midair to dodge both of his clones' attacks while lashing out and striking them both in the head, dispelling them. She landed smoothly and rolled, using the momentum to launch herself at Naruto, Byakugan blazing. "Shit," Naruto thought, before performing a quick substitution with a nearby log. He watched as the log was shattered with ease at the pale-eyed Kunoichi's blow, before she turned on a dime and rushed him again, throwing several shuriken in order to stop the hand signs she knew he was about to start on. Naruto cursed before making a quick shadow clone, having it block the initial attack Hinata had dished out, slowing her momentum and allowing him to escape her brutal Jiyuken strikes yet again. Have I become that predictable? Naruto thought, a frown marring his features. If his frown affected Hinata at all, she didn't show it, choosing instead to unleash a barrage of kunai at him. He leapt up without thinking, immediately realizing his mistake as the girl jumped into the air with him, her face bright with triumph. Thinking quickly, he formed a shadow clone, before kicking off of it, sending it towards the Hyuga and himself away from her. Suddenly, an idea dawned on him, and he grinned widely at the plan. "It's so stupid, it just might work. And I suppose I need to start being completely random or else Hinata-chan is gonna beat me one of these days." He landed on the ground on one knee, his most used hand sign already up, forming a small army of shadow clones behind him. Suddenly, clones were grabbing other clones and launching them at the still airborne Hinata, trying to strike her in midair. Hinata quickly began using her superior taijutsu skills to Jiyuken the clones as they came flying. But so many were coming she began dispelling them with regular taijutsu to save chakra. An axe kick to the head, that one gone. An elbow to the face, dispelled. Suddenly, she drove her fist into the stomach of another, but instead of it dispelling in a cloud of smoke, it simply smiled widely at her through the pain, before quickly flipping them so that he was holding her in a headlock. They smashed into a group of clones that had gathered below them, cushioning their drop back to earth, and Hinata saw the dust clear to witness about 20 kunai pointing at her neck, including one from the boy who was now embracing her from behind. With a sigh of frustration she shrugged. "I concede. I would be dead right now if you were the enemy." A large cloud of smoke wafted over the pair as all of Naruto's clones dispelled, leaving the grinning boy gripping the now blushing girl to him. Although she was a bit embarrassed at being so close, she still wasn't entirely happy. She reverse head-butted him in the chest, causing him to let out a quiet, "OOMF. You idiot," she said, grabbing one of his hands and playing tentatively with his fingers. "If I had still been using Jiyuken against your clones I would have seriously hurt you with that blow to the stomach. That was stupid and reckless for a simple spar, Naruto-kun." She bent back one of his fingers a little far, hearing a light hiss of pain from the blonde. Hinata-chan," he said, attempting to draw his hand away but having it forcefully yanked back into her lap. "I knew that you would stop using unnecessary chakra to only dispel clones, seeing as how you needed enough to finish me off and your reserves aren't big enough to be able to do that yet." His explanation was sound, but Hinata refused to let him win, bending another finger back causing him to yelp lightly. "Stop that." "No," she yelled back, before he noticed a certain wetness on his hand. "Was that, Hinata? Look at me," he murmured, causing the violet-haired beauty to stiffen. "No," she replied with a bit less anger, clutching his hand with now trembling hands. Naruto huffed. He hadn't imagined that she would grow to be so stubborn with him away. But then again, when she had to stand strong to her cold father, to be able to stare him down in battle, he supposed that stubbornness was one of the best traits she could take on to make it easier on her. Better this than a massive ego or a superiority complex. He quickly whipped her around, his eyes widening as he took her expression in. Her eyes were also widened a little in surprise, accentuating the tears that were dripping from their edges. His breath hitched as he tucked her into his chest, rubbing her back soothingly. "Hinata-chan," he said gently, feeling her slight sobs rocking her frame. "Why are you crying?" "I'm sorry I did that, but I had to find a way to win." "You don't understand. she yelled into his chest, muffling her voice. He frowned, still running his hand along her spine. Then tell me, he said just as loud, confused by her actions. Why did girls have to make things so cryptic? Whenever he had a problem with Jiraiya Gigi, which wasn't often, he told him, and then they'd fix it. There was rarely a moment where he was confused with what was going on, everything was so crystal clear. But now, it had been several weeks since they had received their assignments, and they had all taken to their training with gusto. Shino was learning about pressure points, human psychology, and different politics within different villages as a first step in his interrogation training. After all, if the scouting team did manage to capture an enemy in hostile territory, they had to be able to break him there, in case they didn't have a chance to escort him back to friendly territory for a thorough interrogation. As soon as the boy was done being instructed, he would be glued to anatomy textbooks, books on the workings of the human mind, autobiographies from older shinobi, reports from missions or wars, anything that could help him grasp how the minds of shinobi reacted in a given situation. Ibiki was gleeful at the thought of someone who was showing as much enthusiasm at breaking someone's mind as his first and star pupil, who had been busy making a certain Hyuga's life a living hell. Anko had been constantly hunting the young girl, even when their training was supposedly done for the day. This made for a stressful atmosphere around the violet-haired beauty, who not only was afraid that the crazy snake bitch, as Naruto so gracefully put it, would catch her off guard one of these times, which would promise a particularly harsh training session the following day, but that she would hurt Naruto as well in these brutal assaults. After all, if he wasn't busy training with Jiraiya, he was asking her to train with him. If that didn't go as planned, he would train on his own until Hinata was free, and then they would relax, train, go out to eat or whatever else happened to suit their fancy at the time. This meant that the boy was working himself to the bone almost 24/7, which made Hinata worry about him, whenever she wasn't busy worrying about when Anko might pop out next. The first few weeks of training with the girl had been surprising with Naruto. While he remembered her being reserved and unsure of herself in fights in their early academy days, she now fought fiercely, showing him a whole new side of her he had never witnessed before. Of course, the first few fights she hadn't come at him with the intent to kill, which he made clear to her she should do if she wanted to get some kind of experience from their battles, but after a good session of head bopping, he thought she looked rather cute when she whined about him gently knocking her on the head with the underside of his fist. In reassuring words that she most definitely would not kill him, she had agreed. Since then, Naruto had actually had to work to stay away from her deadly chakra-filled strikes, having to utilize more and more tricks in his book as she slowly learned his style of fighting. He was brought from his thoughts as the girl in his arms head butted his chest again. If I had chosen to start using J-Juyuken strikes again. If I had hurt you. She shook her head, more tears flowing freely from her delicate eyes. I wouldn't be able to forgive myself, Naruto-kun. I wouldn't. Something in Naruto's head clicked, and he felt guilt wrap around his conscience. I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. It's just you've been putting me on the ropes lately and I figured it was time to try something new. I suppose flinging myself at you like a kunai was just a tad reckless though. He mused, earning him a quiet giggle from his companion. Just a tad, Naruto-kun? Try a lot of tads. She looked stumped as she tried to find a way to express her feelings, and Naruto snorted, falling back in laughter. Hinata yelped as she was carried with him, landing with her hands on either side of her head and straddling his left leg. Naruto continued to laugh, unaware of the scarlet blush that was slowly creeping up Hinata's face as she realized the position she was in. If anyone were to see her, think fast stalker girl. Hinata groaned, before grabbing Naruto and leaping away from the 30-foot snake that crashed into the ground they were just at, hissing in frustration that he missed his target. Naruto grew somber fast, narrowing her eyes at their opponent before he facepalmed. What do you want, you insane snake bitch? He yelled, stepping in front of Hinata protectively. Hinata rolled her eyes but blushed all the same at his behavior, stepping around him and ignoring his look of disappointment. Surprise attacks are part of training, shorty. Anko yelled back, smiling with glee. She had seen the position that the two runts had been in, and was quick to let her pupil know. If you wanted the day off to relax, you shoulda let me know. I would chipped in for the love hotel. She yelled, almost doubling over in laughter at the look of pure embarrassment on the girl's face as it quickly returned to its previous shade of red. Naruto scratched his head in confusion before shrugging. Can she have the rest of the day off? We just got done having a particularly nasty spar and… Will the enemy let her rest after they pursue her if she's caught killing her target? Anko interrupted, her tone suddenly very serious. I knew you two were duking it out, that's why I decided to attack when the two of you were most vulnerable. You must never let your guard down, especially with the position the two of you have been given. You wouldn't have sensed me if I didn't announce my presence, Hinata, and although your reaction time was splendid when you did know I was there, you would have been dead otherwise. You need to remember that the only time you're considered on safe grounds during my training is when you're sleeping in your bed or in your compound training with your clan, otherwise you're a target. Hinata looked down, a frown looking out of place on her normally happy face. She was frustrated at herself for letting her guard down so easily. Even if she was with Naruto, she had no excuses, especially if she wanted to go on missions with him one day. They both had to be at peak performance if they both wanted to survive. Naruto opened his mouth to defend his friend when Anko interrupted him. And you, Blondie, while I respect your strength, you have nowhere near the amount of experience that I do in the field, and as such you have no right to think that the girl deserves any respite from this training. I chose her personally because I saw her will to work hard and achieve what other people would quit on. I could see that she wouldn't have let you fight her fight anyway, or let you talk me out of it, but I need you to understand so you aren't walking around with a grudge in your heart because I won't let up. I'm doing this so that she doesn't die. She ended with a harsh tone, causing the blonde to glare at her for a moment before tearing his gaze away. She was right, but he didn't have to like it. Faye, whatever. Go kick that snake's ass and get me when you're done, Hinata-chan. I'll be eating at Ichiraku's, he said, giving her a short hug, before dashing away into the woods. Hinata sighed, giving an apologetic look to her sensei. I'm sorry, Anko-sensei, he's just a little fucking dense? Overprotective? An idiot? Anko rattled off a few of her own adjectives, adding to the frown on Hinata's face, causing the older woman to give a sigh of her own. Listen, I don't mean to belittle the kid. He's got a ton of talent, and a tremendous amount of power. But he needs experience to go along with that power or he's a ticking time bomb. She sprawled out on her summon's head, scratching its scaly hide causing it to hum in satisfaction. That temper of his doesn't help either, and neither does his condition. Hinata nodded solemnly, both of them acutely aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki. She suddenly whipped her head to the side as a kunai came whizzing past her, a clear liquid dripping down the blade. Hinata narrowed her eyes, activating her Byakugan as more of the poisoned weapons came flying at her. Alright, enough of this talk, time to defend yourself. Naruto finished off his fourth bowl of ramen roughly, slamming the bowl on the table so hard it shattered in his hands. Tucci came out quickly upon hearing the sound, and looked alarmed upon seeing the broken dish. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Did you cut your hands at all? He asked, more concerned for the boy's well-being than one of his special extra-large ramen bowls. Naruto nodded, looking guilty. I'm fine, it was my fault. I wasn't being careful. I'll pay for a new bowl for you, Tucci-san. The ramen vendor nodded, knowing full well that the boy would. Whenever you have the money, Naruto-kun. But tell me, what has you so stressed, my boy? You were eating my ramen with a passion today, and not your usual one. This one was, how should I say, darker. The man crossed his arms, trying to find a way to put his thoughts into words. As a ramen master, I simply cannot remain idle while my favorite customer is eating with a dark aura. Naruto smiled lightly, touched that the man was so sensitive to his moods that he would notice something was amiss. It's nothing serious, Tucci-san, I'm just worried. About what, Naruto-kun? Naruto hesitated. Hinata-chan. Tucci nodded. Everyone knew of the Hyuga heiress, and her crush on the boy. And Naruto had brought her to eat at his stand many times. She was a nice girl, very quiet though, although he had noticed a certain fiery quality in her, hidden beneath her gentle exterior. He could see why the boy was so attached to her, given his own passionate take on things. What about her, Naruto-kun? Is everything well with her? Well, yeah, Naruto started, his eyebrows furrowing. But, her sensei is very… He shook his head, unable to think of suitable adjectives for the woman in mind. Tucci nodded, getting his meaning. So she's in danger from her training? Naruto shook his head. No, I just don't want her pushing herself too hard, you know? Naruto's eyebrows knitted together as Tucci snorted, before letting out a short laugh. What's so funny? Naruto, my boy, how often do you train? Naruto shrugged his shoulders, caught off guard by the question. I don't know, something like 12 to 16 hours a day? And of that time, how many times are you almost at zero chakra left? Or even, how many times do you get hurt while training, to the point where most people would stop? Naruto puffed his chest out proudly. I go longer and harder than most people. That's why I'll be the strongest one day, just you wait, Tucci-san, he declared, thumping his chest with his hand. Tucci shook his head. That's exactly the point I'm getting to. Naruto tilted his head, slightly confused. You're pushing yourself very hard, giving yourself very little breaks to improve yourself as fast as possible, right? He asked patiently. Naruto nodded, before a slight "oh" appeared on his face. He bowed his head, ashamed at his actions from before. Hadn't Anko just told him that she was doing this for Hinata's benefit? To help protect her on missions? Tucci nodded, satisfied that the boy's reaction had telegraphed his comprehension of the likeness between the situations. Good, you understand. Now, if it's worrying you this much, why don't you go on a mission to get your mind off of things? Naruto, recalling the words Anko had thrown at him about needing more experience, nodded. That's a good idea, old man. Thanks for the advice and the ramen. I'll pay you back soon, he called, before entering the ramen stand. As soon as his face hit the public view, it was blank. A few villagers who had heard his voice from inside the stand were glaring at it, but immediately turned their heads as soon as they came into his view. Inside, Naruto sighed. They were afraid of him. An improvement to the hateful stares he was used to, but still not his end goal. Ever since his return, unless he was in the strict company of the handful of people he knew he could trust to some extent, Hinata, Tucci, Jiraiya, the Hokage, even Anko after their first few meetings, this was the expression he wore. When on missions, this was to be his facade. Cold, emotionless, mechanical. The perfect shinobi. Ironically, he was the opposite of the mask he now wore. While he trusted very few, he really was a warm and caring person. To those who had shown him concern and friendship. Anyone else, especially these ignorant villagers. He turned down the main street, walking steadily towards the Hokage Tower. Many in the streets shunned away from him, even going so far as to avert their gaze, desperate not to invoke the demon's wrath. He watched as a ball rolled out of the crowd and towards his foot. He tensed up and moved his arm up to protect his face, thinking it may have been a spike or flash bomb, but nothing happened. It was just a regular ball. A small girl came running out of the crowd, freezing when she saw the boy picking it up. Naruto watched as a few fat tears rolled down her cheeks, obviously thinking that she would never get it back now that this strange boy had it. He slowly walked up to her, watching her freeze in fear and look around for her mother, who was nowhere to be found. He knelt down, and she flinched away. Is this your ball? She stared at him, wide-eyed, before nodding quickly. He smiled at her, not a large foxy one, but a small reassuring one, as he handed it to her. Be careful, if you lose this again it might get stepped on and popped, and then you wouldn't have this anymore, alright? She blinked before nodding, giving him a growing smile as she took the toy back. Thank you. Naruto, he said, patting her head. Nato, she squealed, a smile plastered on her face. Naruto's smile grew a little wider. What a cute little G.I. Get away from my daughter. His mask immediately returned as he stood up straight, looking the woman who was glaring at him straight in her eyes. She recoiled a little, but stood her ground holding her arms out. See, come on, sweetie. See, come back to mommy, she said shakily, never taking her eyes off the blonde who just stared back passively. The little girl looked at her mom weirdly, before turning around and hugging Naruto's leg. He watched the woman's face contort, going from worried to horrified in the span of a second. Thank you, Nato, the girl said happily. I had to go to my mommy now, bye. She skipped back happily to her mom who snatched her up and held her close, as if she thought the child would disappear at any moment. Mommy, Nato found my ball and gave it back to me, she said happily, showing her mother the ball excitedly as evidence. The woman paid her no mind though, glaring at the blonde genin with as much courage she could muster. Saint, stay away from her. You can't have her. She's all I have left of Tomo, she finished, tears leaking from her eyes. Naruto's mask broke a little as he felt pity overwhelm him. She, like everyone else in this fucking town, truly believed that he was the Kyuubi. It wasn't necessarily her fault. She only wanted to protect her daughter. Her husband must have been a shinobi that was killed recently, and she was terrified of losing the remainder of her family. He took a step forward. Listen, miss, I'm not. Don't come near her. You fucking demon, stay away from my little girl. She screamed, taking a step back. Naruto seethed. Look, if you would just listen to me. And your lies? So you can corrupt me, and take my daughter away? You're vile, go to hell where you belong. She yelled, desperately looking for a way out. Naruto was angry now. Why wouldn't they just listen? If they would only hear him out, they would see that he wasn't a bad guy. He wanted to protect them, not hurt them. That's why he became a shinobi, to protect himself, but also to protect those precious to him. And if these stupid assholes would just see that he wasn't the nine-tailed fox incarnate, they would be his precious people too. His eyes flashed red as he felt his anger come to a boil, and noticed the panicked expressions that several of the villagers were showing, thinking that he was about to kill them all. This is it, he's finally showing his true form. Oh god, not again, we just finished rebuilding. Someone get the Anbu, that thing is about to go on a rampage. Naruto shook his head violently, trying to expel the voices from his head, but his sensitive hearing picked up every word, transferring each message of hate directly into his conscious. Shut up, I don't want to hurt any of you. I want to protect you. I want you all to live long and happy. I want you to be happy. I just want to be happy. Shut up, shut you p. He bellowed, the Kyuubi's influence creeping into his voice and giving it a deep bass. The street fell silent and motionless, every last person looking towards the young boy who was breathing heavily, waiting for him to snap at any moment. Suddenly, he vanished, causing them all to whip their heads around in panic, making sure he wasn't about to claw his way through them from behind. When the tense moment passed, they all hurried on their way, obviously put off by their encounter with the Jinchuriki. A few started making their way to the Hokage Tower, intent on filing a complaint that the boy was going to go berserk and start murdering everyone soon. The little girl who had gotten her toy back stared at the spot the blonde boy had disappeared from, her small mind in distress. She tugged on her mother's sleeve to get her attention, causing the woman to look down at her and smile tightly. Yes, sweetie? Mommy, why is Nato so sad? The woman's lips pursed. He isn't sad, honey, he's a very dangerous man who wants to hurt you. You need to promise mommy you'll stay away from him, okay? The little girl looked at her mother confused. Then why was he crying, mommy? The woman stared at her blankly, before picking her daughter up and started making their way home. She had no answer to that. Naruto stumbled into the Hokage's office seeing red, clutching the wall as he tried to calm himself. Sarutobi jumped at the unexpected intrusion into his office, looking worried as Naruto's eyes practically glowed red, bloody tears leaking from his eyes, his hands curled into tight fists that leaked his red life essence from where his now sharpened nails had punctured his palms. The older man walked over and placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder, although he said nothing. Naruto took deep breaths, feeling the comfort his surrogate grandfather bestowed upon him flowing through his body. His eyes gradually changed back to normal, his nails retracting from inside the skin of his hands. Naruto, what happened? Sarutobi asked when it seemed that the boy was sufficiently calm. Naruto took a deep breath through his nose and wiped his face of the scarlet tears before speaking. Villagers, he said simply, giving the old Hokage a look that spoke more than any words Naruto might have come up with. The leader sighed, pulling the boy into a fatherly embrace, which the boy returned gladly. They stayed that way for a while, Sarutobi thinking of the last wish Minato wanted, and Naruto wondering what he had to do to get through to the ignorant inhabitants of the village. I'm sorry, Naruto, Sarutobi said, as if sensing Naruto's thoughts. All of these people are still blinded by hate. Although 12 years seems a long time to you, to an old codger like me it's but a small part of our long histories. He said, smiling when Naruto chuckled at his remark of old codger. Naruto nodded, a frown replacing his small grin. I don't know what I have to do to get them to see that I'm not it. I don't know if I'll ever get through to them, he finished sadly, a look of frustration on his face. Sarutobi nodded, thinking the same thing. It would take a miracle to get them to see the error of their ways, my boy. Or your father himself speaking to them. I'm so sorry. Hey, Gigi, Naruto said, driving the old man away from his remorseful thoughts. Are there any teams going out on missions soon? Like, out of the village? Or any solo missions I can do? He asked, an almost pleading tone in his voice. Sarutobi smiled before reaching towards his desk, grabbing a file. As a matter of fact, I do, Naruto-kun. Team 10 has just received a mission to guard a small trading caravan on its way to the south side of Fire Country. Let's see, he said, looking closer at the file. Low C rank, guarding 2 wagons with a total of 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. Expected time for completion should be 4 days to travel to their destination, and a day and a half back once they're dropped off. An extra day or 2 can be taken, however, so the mission should take about a week. He finished, setting his pipe in his mouth and lighting it. If you would like to assist on this mission, go find Team 10's sensei, Asuma Sarutobi. One of Naruto's eyebrows rose, but if he saw it, the Hokage didn't acknowledge it. Tell him that I've given you my permission and recommendation to go along on this mission as single support. If he gives the okay, you're to meet with him and his team tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. sharp, packed for a week-long mission. Do you understand? He asked, peering over his pipe at Naruto. The blonde nodded excitedly, causing the old man to smile. Wonderful. In that case, go find my son. He should be at the barbecue place by the Akamichi compound, I would expect. One of his pupils always ropes him into paying for his meals. He chuckled, obviously amused with the thought. Naruto nodded, smiling at the elderly Hokage before him. Thank you, Gigi, this means a lot to me, he said, before bounding out of the room. Sarutobi chuckled to himself again, before his face grew very serious. Salamander, you have something to report? An Anbu mask seemed to bleed out of the darkness in one of the corners of the room. Hokage-sama, it appears that he is on the move again. We're not sure if he's targeting the Uzumaki boy or the Uchiha, but his agents are moving. And fast. Sarutobi nodded. Keep tails on both of them, and make sure they're not seen. I cannot express the importance of this. We could lose the trust of either of them if they detect that they're being followed, and even if we were to explain they might not understand. Keep extra care of Naruto, his skills are advancing quickly. Just make sure that the enemy agents do not interfere with them at all. He said, sitting down in his chair. The Anbu bowed his head, muttering, "Sir," before bleeding back into the shadows. Sarutobi sighed, leaning back in his chair. He was getting too old for this. The next morning, Naruto sighed, as he made several shadow clones with a bit more chakra than usual so that they would last more than a few hours. He ordered a few to keep studying various jutsu theories, some to keep his dingy apartment in as good a condition it could get, but the last one he pulled aside, much to the confusion of his other doppelgangers. "What's up, boss?" the clone whispered, obviously excited that he was singled out from the others. "Shush, I'm giving you a mission the others would kill to have. You, in particular," Naruto whispered back, both of them leaving the apartment. "Wah? Cool, I must be a badass." The clone whispered back excitedly, making Naruto sweat drop. He had actually just chosen one at random, but whatever helped his clone sleep at night. Did it sleep? Wait, did they have to eat? He shook his head, now was not the time for these thoughts. "You need to go and find Hinata-chan and tell her about the mission and when I'll be back," he whispered, looking around frantically. The clone had a flabbergasted expression on his face, before it pumped its fist excitedly. "Fuck yeah, that's the best MMPHPHMHP. It tried to talk through Naruto's hand but found that it couldn't, unsurprisingly. "Shut the fuck up," Naruto whispered menacingly, looking to see if any clones were jumping out to challenge the clone for his job. When none did, he let go, glaring at the copy as it scratched its head in embarrassment. "Sorry boss, just got a little excited. I'll make sure she knows, don't worry," it said, before leaping off into the sunrise to find the princess. Naruto sighed before making his way towards the gates. He didn't really want to leave her, but he seriously needed a break from the villagers. And Hinata's crazy sensei. As he neared the gates, he spotted the members of Team 10, and almost let his mask slip to let out a groan. This is gonna be a long mission.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.